Today, we're having a Christmas party with 20 family members. Make sure you don't embarrass me. I was filled with questions at Kieran's statement. The Christmas party was supposed to be at Kieran's brother, Tommy's house. Soon after, my father-in-law Brent and mother-in-law Annie arrived. Seeing me clutching my stomach and breathing heavily, they looked furious, like they were about to face a demon. Then, Annie shouted Kieran and stormed back into the living room. There, Brent grabbed Kieran by the collar, and the next moment, a loud noise filled the room. My name is Emma. I'm a 31-year-old housewife. I married Kieran when I was 28. We met at a cafe we both frequented. We were regulars who knew each other by face and greeted when we met. It was just that until one day, when the cafe's popular dish was down to the last one, Kieran let me have it. Kieran is a big guy with a loud voice to match. He's assertive, but he was shyly offering me the dish that day. His bashfulness contrasted with his size, which I found adorable. Looking back, I was too naive. We exchanged numbers and went on a few dates. Our first date was for steak, and on the next one, he took me, in my casual outfit, to a fancy restaurant, a bit out of place. Kieran can be inconsiderate, making decisions without consulting others. He works at a major electronics company, where he's known for being the fastest to get promoted among his peers. He's proud of his work, which often leads to him acting on his own. Love is blind, they say, and I mistook Kieran's assertiveness for masculinity, which I now deeply regret. On our third date, Kieran proposed to me. It felt too soon, but he had already booked a wedding venue. Before I could even respond, I was shocked by his initiative. Eventually, his persistence led to a whirlwind marriage just a few months after we met. My parents were surprised too, but, like me, were overwhelmed by Kieran's forcefulness. He wanted me to quit my job right after getting married, but it was all too sudden, and I couldn't leave my job. I told Kieran I'd work until I got pregnant, and he reluctantly agreed. He was the type who preferred his wife to be a housewife. The first year of our marriage passed without incident, and it was a happy one. However, Kieran still made decisions unilaterally, from buying a car to choosing our new home without consulting me. I had dreamed of seeing the aurora borealis on our honeymoon, but next thing I knew, we were eating pasta in Italy. If I ignored Kieran's selfishness, it was a happy life. But everything changed when I found out I was pregnant after a year. It felt less like tumbling down a hill and more like being on a roller coaster. As promised, I quit my job to focus on homemaking. To our surprise, I was pregnant with twins. Kieran, deeply moved, looked forward to being a dad to 2 kids at once. He was so proud that he even bragged about it at work. His phone wallpaper was the ultrasound image of the fetuses, which he showed off everywhere. I secretly found it in poor taste, but I kept quiet. The thought of twins made me more anxious than happy. Kieran, on the other hand, was over the moon and seemed indifferent to my worries. The obstetrician advised a hospital stay due to the risks of a multiple birth, which Kieran agreed to. He must have been worried about what could happen. Hospitalization was a relief for me, but it brought new worries about household matters. Kieran didn't do housework. Being the eldest of 3 brothers, he had never had to. It wasn't just that he didn't, he couldn't. The fact that his family lineage was well respected and he was a direct descendant had spoiled him. He had always had someone to take care of even his personal needs. It seemed someone had been helping out not just with the household chores, but even with personal care. I couldn't possibly leave Kieran alone at home in that state. The thought of tidying up the house after being discharged was something I felt I couldn't possibly manage. So, I asked Brent and Annie for help. I requested them to either have Kieran stay at their house while I was hospitalized or to have Annie take care of our home. I get along well with both Brent and Annie. The typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict doesn't apply to us. Despite coming from a distinguished family, they're very down-to-earth and easy to talk to. The typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict doesn't apply to us. Kieran ended up staying at his parents' house until I was discharged from the hospital after giving birth. I checked into the hospital, feeling relieved. Under the care of the doctors and nurses, I safely delivered twins through a cesarean section. A healthy boy and girl, both crying loudly. When it was time to leave the hospital, Kieran, Brent, Annie, Kieran's siblings and their families, and my parents all came. We were a large family of 10. The nurses and doctors were surprised to see such a large group. They commented on how happy our family seemed. To an outsider, we must have looked like a happy clan. Although I felt a bit embarrassed by the commotion, I was secretly pleased. That moment was the peak of my happiness. But life became challenging from there. Kieran's attitude changed drastically. My life before and after giving birth were polar opposites. And not for the better. Issues I had noticed before became more pronounced, and any endearing qualities he might have had disappeared. This change started when Kieran returned home. The first thing he said was, "There's nothing like being in your own home." As he stretched out comfortably. I stretched myself too thin, indeed. I, too, thought my home was the best. But here I am, with twins in a baby carrier and bags in both hands. Thinking about the life ahead, there's just no way I can afford to stretch myself thin and relax. Brent, Annie, and my parents had all kindly suggested that we spend some time alone as a family. My parents live about 2 hours away by train, so they decided to stay in a hotel for the night. I suggested they stay with us to save the trouble, but they insisted on going to the hotel directly from the hospital. It was nice being at my parents' home, but Mom could be really nagging after a while. Kieran threw the baby care items we got from the maternity ward onto the floor and slumped down on the sofa. Then, astonishingly, he demanded, "I want a hot coffee." With both my hands full, and even one baby against my chest and another on my back, Kieran had the audacity to ask for coffee. And not just any coffee, but hot coffee at that. How does he expect me to set up the coffee maker and pour it into a cup in this state? And he was even complaining about his shoulders being sore, rotating them as if he was the one in need of care. I decided to ignore his request for the moment, and gently laid the twins down in their crib next to the living room. That's when I felt a dull pain in my abdomen. The cesarean section wound hadn't fully healed yet. My body stiffened from the pain, and my expression contorted. But Kieran didn't even glance my way, absorbed with his mobile phone. Raising my voice at Kieran would only risk waking the twins. And I was still too weak from the hospital stay. After putting the twins to sleep, I chose to remain silent, prioritizing their sleep and my recovery. Kieran showed no interest in either household chores or childcare. It was a stark contrast to just a short while ago when even the nurses envied our happiness. Now, all I felt was anxiety. The next day, my parents arrived early. And by the afternoon, Brent and Annie had also come to help. The 4 of us, along with the 2 sets of grandparents, began the challenging task of caring for the twins. Kieran, as expected, was of no help at all. In fact, he required more attention than the babies themselves. While dealing with Kieran on the side, I devoted myself to learning the ropes of parenting. Annie reassured me, saying that this is the time when the children teach you to be a mom. It was hard to believe that someone as supportive as Annie was Kieran's mother. My parents live farther away than my in-laws, so my mom can't visit as easily. It looks like we'll be relying more on Brent and Annie. Brent is still working, so we'll mainly depend on Annie. I'm really grateful that Annie is such a kind person. Both Brent and Annie adore the twins. Even when I'm clumsily changing diapers, they tell me not to rush and are very supportive. Amidst this, Kieran was the one who became sullen. He felt left out as we were all focused on the twins. He became more demanding than usual, asking for water, wanting to read the newspaper, or saying he was hungry. Brent tried to engage Kieran in parenting, saying, "It can be hard for dads to get involved in childcare, but it's rewarding once you try." Annie is kind, but Brent is also a good person. I wonder how someone like Kieran could come from such great parents. My dad also shared how nervous he was when he first took me out, trying to relate to Kieran. But Kieran showed no interest in these valuable lessons. All that came out of Kieran's mouth were disinterested responses like, "Oh, really?" Brent and my dad's stories were meant to ease the embarrassment and anxiety of making mistakes, a kindness towards Kieran. However, Kieran seemed uninterested even in their stories. Then, Kieran went too far. Not only did he show no interest in childcare, but his selfish behavior finally made Brent and Annie angry. While I was breastfeeding the twins, Kieran came up to me, asking if the food ready yet because he's hungry. Moreover, he insisted on having a proper meal, not just any frozen food. As I was bewildered, wondering what he expected me to do while I was in the middle of breastfeeding, Brent stepped in to offer his help. "You're not a child. If you're hungry, make something yourself." Brent's statement was completely reasonable. Yet, Kieran became visibly angry. "You're a housewife, so it's only natural you should cook. I rarely use frozen food in the meals I prepare." But to Kieran, even one frozen item meant I was cutting corners. Annie joined the argument as well. "Babies can't make and eat their own food." Brent further suggested that since Kieran could also feed the baby with formula milk, he should take a turn at feeding. Faced with unanimous criticism, Kieran made a shocking statement. "If I do the feeding, then there's nothing left for the mother to do." This comment left Brent, Annie, and my parents dumbfounded. All I could do was sigh. Afterward, Annie relentlessly lectured him, and Brent thoroughly taught him childcare tasks like changing diapers. Kieran's face during this time was sullen, clearly showing his reluctance. 2 years passed, and I became pregnant again. Kieran hadn't changed at all during these years. I was constantly busy with the twins and household chores. Without Brent and Annie's help, our family life would have fallen apart long ago. Annie helped with the housework, and Brent tried to teach Kieran about parenting. Kieran, seemingly annoyed by his parents, found excuses to leave the house often. He claimed he was busy with work trips and overtime work, but it seemed he just didn't want to be home. This pregnancy wasn't twins, but my morning sickness was worse than before. I couldn't stand the smell of bread, so pasta became a regular meal. Kieran was unhappy about this too, constantly complaining about wanting bread. Annie, frustrated by his complaints, told him to make his own meals. Surrounded by Annie and Brent, Kieran reluctantly cooked. Regardless of how it looked, I tried to eat the meal he prepared. However, due to my morning sickness, I couldn't finish it. Kieran sighed dramatically at the sight of the leftover food. "I went through the trouble of making this, and this is what I get? If it's too awful to eat, just say so." After dropping this sarcastic remark, Kieran left the house. He returned an hour later. From that point on, Kieran completely stopped doing any housework or childcare. His excuse was that his efforts were a waste of goodwill. Unashamedly, on his days off, he started fishing as a hobby. On weekdays, he used work and socializing at work events as excuses to go to bars, coming home late. There were days when I didn't even see Kieran's face. I apologized multiple times about the meal issue and asked for his help around the house. Hoping he'd come home earlier on weekdays and spend some weekends at home was a modest request, I thought. I just wanted him to spend a little time with the twins. But Kieran's response was unbelievable. "You've been raising the twins for 2 years. You must be used to it by now." With that, he'd leave for fishing. And, "This is your second pregnancy, and it's just one baby this time. There's nothing I can do." He'd even say things like that. The twins, now 2 years old, haven't warmed up to Kieran at all, perhaps due to his indifferent attitude. In fact, they seem to dislike being around Kieran. They'd even start to cry if he just walked by. What I regret is wondering why I got pregnant with a third child. Perhaps I was fooled by Kieran's occasional whims of kindness. It's regrettable, but there's nothing I can do about it now. The baby growing inside me isn't to blame. Despite my frustrations, my pregnancy was progressing smoothly, and I was nearing full term. Like last time, I was scheduled for a cesarean section. The preparations for hospitalization weren't an issue, thanks to my previous experience. However, the due date being right after Christmas meant a busy holiday season. There would be a big Christmas party at the in-laws, which I'd likely miss this year. The biggest concern for this birth was Kieran. Now, there was the added responsibility of taking care of the twins. I needed Kieran's help. But I knew it was too much to ask for him to take time off work for the birth. So, to compromise, I asked if he could at least take care of the kids after work. His response was cold and devoid of kindness, saying he couldn't make such a promise. Then, Kieran said something even worse. "It's embarrassing for a man to take time off work for his wife's birth. It makes me look like a useless husband who's henpecked by his wife." Unable to hold back any longer, I was about to retort when Kieran demanded food. His words immediately drained my will to argue. He continued to complain during the meal, upset by my request. "By the age of 2, they should be able to eat by themselves." They might be able to eat, but they certainly can't cook. Kieran lacks the quality of thoughtfulness. Irritated, I couldn't help but respond. "Then you should be able to do more than a 2-year-old. Show them how it's done." Unfazed by my sarcasm, Kieran said something even more outrageous. "I'm fine. You all live off my earnings. How does that logic even work?" Kieran's argument is far too flawed. Up until my hospitalization, he repeatedly reminded me that he was the one providing for me. I never intended to quit my job. It was Kieran who insisted I leave work to focus on household duties after we got married. Each time he says I'm providing for the family, I think to myself, you have no right to say that. With all these frustrations, the week of my hospitalization arrived. Then, Kieran made another insensitive comment. "Make sure you attend the Christmas party." I couldn't understand why he would say such a thing. He was worried it would look bad if the eldest son of the family with direct lineage to respected ancestry attended alone. He had no understanding of the pain and risks involved in giving birth. Childbirth is a life-threatening endeavor. Kieran continued with unbelievable remarks. "Why should I be the only one to attend? Who's going to do the cooking and serve the drinks? Was he mistaking me for a servant or a housekeeper?" It was unthinkable to risk my life for the sake of Kieran's pride. It's astonishing what Kieran can come up with. Kieran and I repeatedly had intense exchanges of come and no, it's impossible. In the end, Brent talked to Kieran, and it was decided that I wouldn't attend. As Christmas approached, Kieran remained sullen, and it was the day before my hospitalization. Unfortunately, it also happened to be the day of the Christmas party. On the day of the Christmas party, I was experiencing some abdominal discomfort and was lying down beside the twins. Suddenly, I realized Kieran was standing there. Groggily, I looked up at Kieran. "Today, we're having a Christmas party with 20 family members. Make sure you don't embarrass me." I wonder what Kieran is saying. I was filled with confusion at Kieran's words. The party was supposed to be at Tommy's house. Kieran sat down and shook my shoulder. He was demanding a meal for 20 people and desserts that the ladies would enjoy. It seemed Kieran had unilaterally decided to host the Christmas party at our house. Brent, Annie, and the rest of the family had been considerate about the twins and my pregnancy. I couldn't understand why suddenly 20 people were expected today. I hadn't noticed, but there were missed calls from Annie and Brent on my mobile phone. I was scheduled for hospitalization tomorrow. Labor could start at any time now. It was absolutely impossible to entertain 20 relatives under these circumstances. I told Kieran it was unreasonable to spring this on me suddenly. At the expense of paying a little more, couldn't we arrange for a catering service? I even humbly suggested. However, Kieran angrily raised his voice, insisting the party be at our house. "Are you trying to shame me? As the wife of the eldest son of a family with direct lineage to respected ancestry, you should maintain your dignity." Kieran was imposing his selfish demands, continuing with outdated views that a wife should silently obey her husband. I lost the energy to argue back. When I fell silent, Kieran seemed to take it as agreement, smiling smugly. He then announced he was going to pick up the relatives and told me to prepare for the party before leaving. Given how everything was arranged, I couldn't possibly refuse. It would inconvenience all the relatives. With that thought in mind, I began to get ready, despite my large belly. I texted Kieran to let him know that going shopping was out of the question and I'd have to make do with what we had. I had stocked up on groceries considering my upcoming hospital stay, so using them up wouldn't be an issue. Despite the discomfort from my tight belly, I managed to prepare the meals. We were short on drinks, so I decided to order them and get it delivered. Just as I finished all the preparations, Kieran texted to say he was on his way home. In just 2 hours, I had prepared the food and drinks. I wished I could pat myself on the back. The twins were getting sleepy, so I put them to bed in another room. Soon, I heard the front door open and lively voices. I went to greet everyone. Annie and Brent expressed their concern, asking me if I was okay. The call earlier was probably made out of concern for me. I could only respond with a vague smile and tried to brush it off. The living and dining areas were packed with 20 guests, and the Christmas party began. I was so busy serving food and drinks that I didn't have a moment to sit down. Everyone kept asking if I was okay, but I just laughed it off. Kieran, on the other hand, was in a good mood, boasting about my resilience. However, Brent, Annie, and Tommy looked worried. Standing continuously while preparing and moving around to pour drinks made the tightness in my abdomen increasingly unbearable. Eventually, I excused myself to check on the children, using it as a reason to leave the room. Watching the twins sleep, I too fell asleep. Sometime later, what felt like tightness turned into pain. Not wanting to worry anyone, I covered my mouth with my hands. The pain in my belly grew sharper and more intense. It had been 3 hours since Kieran sprung the Christmas party on me. As I endured the pain, suddenly the door opened. And there stood Tommy, seemingly having mistaken the room for the bathroom. "Sorry, I mistook this for the bathroom." Saying this, Tommy closed the door and hurried away. Soon after, Brent and Annie arrived. Seeing me clutching my stomach and breathing heavily, they looked furious. The next moment, Annie shouted for Kieran and stormed back into the living room. I weakly stood up and returned to the living room as well. There, I saw Brent grabbing Kieran by the collar, and the next moment, a loud slap echoed through the room. Kieran's cheeks are turning red. Brent slapped Kieran on the cheek. Brent's eyes were sharp, and his usually gentle face looked demonic. Even I, who wasn't being scolded, flinched in fear. Kieran, shocked, was frozen in place.
"What the hell are you doing?"
Kieran flinched at Brent's loud voice. The relatives who had been enjoying their drinks fell silent and turned to look at Kieran.
"Do you understand what condition Emma is in?"
Annie glared at Kieran with a demonic intensity. One of the relatives noticed me and offered me a seat on the sofa. Words of anger were directed at Kieran from the other family members. "You said the birth was still far off, but she's about to give birth, isn't she?" "I thought you said she was in the stable period," someone commented. It seemed Kieran had convinced the relatives that my delivery was still far off. He had told Brent and Annie that there were no signs of labor yet, which is why my hospitalization was postponed. Disdain filled the room as everyone started looking at Kieran with contempt. Relatives with children around the twins' age expressed their disbelief. Women were saying things like, "I can't believe this. If I were in her shoes, it would be unforgivable. What a terrible husband." There were also apologetic voices saying they were sorry for not knowing, feeling deceived by Kieran. The atmosphere was far from festive, resembling more of a funeral. Unable to withstand the mood, Kieran started making strained excuses.
"She's always making excuses about taking care of the twins or being pregnant, or saying it's too close to the delivery to do any housework."
Everyone turned their attention to Kieran, wondering what he was trying to say.
"That's why I made her prepare food for 20 people today, and even serve drinks."
I couldn't make sense of his words. And I'm sure everyone else was even more bewildered. Yet, Kieran continued.
"She hasn't done anything up until now. This is hardly enough to make up for it. The revelation that he made me cook for 20 people caused an uproar among the guests. Kieran, faced with their condemnation, began to sweat. A female relative suggested they disband immediately, and people started to clean up. The twins' crying could be heard from the back. Brent and Annie went to check on them. Tommy, who has a child about the same age as the twins, looked at Kieran with disdain. "That's despicable," Tommy murmured quietly. Kieran was belittled by everyone as both a husband and a father, shrinking smaller in their presence. His usually assertive and arrogant demeanor was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my belly. The intervals between the pains seemed to be getting shorter. It was likely that labor has started. I tried to speak to Kieran, who was being scolded and had shrunk down. But he was unresponsive in shock. Someone asked if they should call the hospital for me, and I nodded slightly. Another person handed me a phone. And when I called the hospital, they told me to come in immediately. I announced to everyone that I was heading to the hospital and tried to stand up, but I couldn't get up. Tommy suggested calling an ambulance, and at that, Kieran finally reacted. "If you're calling an ambulance, tell them not to use the siren. It'd be embarrassing if the neighbors found out." I couldn't believe Kieran was more concerned about appearances than my condition. Amidst the stunned silence of everyone, Kieran continued. "If you're going, go by yourself. It's your fault the mood was killed anyway." It wasn't my fault at all, it was due to Kieran's lies. Everyone must be thinking the same. Amid the astonishment of everyone present, another loud sound was heard. Before anyone realized, Annie, who had returned, slapped Kieran on the cheek. Kieran clutched his face, tears welling up in his eyes. "I never thought you could be so morally corrupt. Giving birth is a matter of life and death." Standing behind Annie, Brent was holding the twins, one in each arm. "The pain Emma has endured is nothing compared to this." Brent, too, seemed furious, his arms trembling as he carefully placed the twins on the floor. "It's not my fault. I'm the one providing for everyone here." Kieran insisted that I was to blame for embarrassing him in front of everyone and that he was faultless. Even in such a moment, Kieran's sense of elitism was evident. Naturally, no one sympathized with Kieran. My Sael, Caitlin offered to drive since she hadn't been drinking, raising her hand. The room erupted in cheers. The decision was made for Caitlin to drive our car, and everyone quickly started moving. Some to fetch my hospital bag from the bedroom, as directed by Annie, and others to tidy up, with Brent collecting the empty dishes. Kieran alone, rubbing his slapped cheek, was fuming, muttering that if it weren't for Dad and Mom, he'd be pressing charges. Perhaps embarrassed and his pride wounded, Kieran's face turned beet red. Moreover, even his ears turned red, indicating he must have felt quite humiliated. The commotion woke the twins, who started crying loudly. With the women busy tidying up, the men took turns trying to soothe the twins. Kieran didn't lift a finger to help. And everyone else seemed to have given up on him. At that moment, I felt utterly fed up with Kieran. I honestly thought I no longer needed such a useless partner. It was Tommy who stepped in to entertain the twins, saying he often played with his own kids and started playing with them. He said that he's used to playing with his kids at home, so you can leave it to me. With that, he started playing with the twins. With support, I stood up and informed him that there were toys in the children's room and that the kids had no food allergies. I also told them to feel free to use any food from the fridge. Kieran kept muttering to himself that he wasn't wrong until the end, but I ignored him and headed for the entrance. Caitlin then drove me to the hospital in our car. Upon arrival, a nurse immediately called for a doctor, who took me to the delivery room. It seemed I was close to giving birth, given the intervals of my contractions. Sure enough, as soon as I was on the delivery table, I gave birth. It was a relief that it was an easy delivery. However, the one who I truly felt sorry for was Caitlin. Unable to leave, she ended up having to stay until the next morning. The day after I safely gave birth, Annie and Brent came to the hospital with the twins. After the incident, Kieran had sulked in a corner of the room, drinking beer from a can. Brent took Kieran to the bedroom, not wanting the children to see their father being scolded. Out of the twins' hearing, Brent reportedly scolded Kieran all night long. Kieran seemed to have lost all his spirit. Brent shared yesterday's events with a wry smile. Eventually, Kieran came to my hospital room. In front of Brent and Annie, he was meek and quietly apologized for his actions the day before. The impact of being hit by both Brent and Annie seemed to have deeply affected him. They kindly left me alone with Kieran. But his attitude changed immediately.
"It's your fault I got hit by Dad and Mom."
He went on to complain about my shortcomings and lack of consideration. At that point, I was utterly fed up with Kieran. I firmly decided to divorce him then. Despite the apprehension of becoming a single mother with 3 children, I knew I couldn't stay with Kieran any longer. Without hesitation, I pressed the nurse call button. A nurse came right away. And soon after, Brent and Annie returned to the room, wondering what was happening.
"This man is a stranger to me. Please ask him to leave."
The nurse looked bewildered, but Annie seemed to understand. She promptly escorted Kieran out of the room. With Kieran in tow, Brent and Annie left the hospital. As they were leaving, they mentioned that my parents would visit in the afternoon. True to Annie's words, my parents arrived in the afternoon. I shared the events of the previous day and my decision to divorce Kieran with them. My parents initially thought Kieran had been unfaithful when they heard about the divorce from Annie. They had been under the impression that divorce always involved infidelity. They couldn't have imagined that a heavily pregnant woman was forced by her husband to prepare for and serve at a Christmas party. I took my time, explaining the circumstances to my parents intermittently. Not only did I talk about being made to prepare meals for 20 people and being forced to serve drinks, but I also shared, through tears, how hard it had been and how much I had endured up until now. As they listened, my parents cried with me. By the end of our conversation, we were all smiling through our tears. My mom gently suggested I recuperate at their home after the hospital. I was discharged without issue and have been resting at my parents' house since. Regarding the divorce, Brent and Annie agreed there was no reason to oppose it. The only one who was vehemently against it was Kieran. He tried to contact me numerous times, but I blocked his calls and informed Brent and Annie not to let him contact me. Without me to serve almost as a servant, Kieran seemed to have lost his mental stability. Living alone, he couldn't keep the house tidy, and it became cluttered with trash. At work, he vented his frustration through power harassment, nearly facing disciplinary action from HR. Despite this, his behavior persisted, extending even to clients and partners, eventually leading to his dismissal. By then, it seemed no one sympathized with him. Currently, Kieran is re-educating himself on human decency while working on the family farm. Kieran apparently often cries, saying that the home he shared with me was his oasis of peace. I heard all of this from Annie, who has been in touch with me. But for me, that home was nothing but a desert. With Brent and Annie's help, my divorce from Kieran was finalized smoothly. The house we lived in was sold, and I received the entire sum from the sale as compensation in the divorce settlement. I decided to live with my parents. I still keep in touch with Brent, Annie, and Tommy. Sometimes, the twins ask to see Caitlin and Tommy, who happily play with them. For Brent and Annie, the twins are still their grandchildren. They visit whenever they can, enjoying their time with all 3 kids, who affectionately call them Grandpa and Grandma. The children have also grown fond of Grandpa and Grandma. Looking back, if it weren't for that Christmas party, I might not have made it to the hospital. Kieran alone couldn't have managed both the hospital trip and caring for the twins. In a way, that incident helped me come to terms with my situation with Kieran. It's odd, but I find myself grateful to Kieran for hosting that Christmas party at our home. Life is unpredictable. I'll never forget the kindness of those who helped me during that time. With my 3 children, I aim to find even greater happiness and hope to offer help to others in return.
Your husband and I are starting a business together. We'll take the sales and the employees. Dorothy and Brian said this with a nasty smirk. I was at a loss for words. As soon as we graduated from college, we started a small business. And this happened just when the business began to turn a profit at last. The two cornered me in the office, laughing. Thanks for everything up to now. But we don't need you anymore. Brian and I can handle it ourselves. Brian nodded to Dorothy's triumphant words. It seemed they had planned to cut me out all along. I clenched my teeth. For considering them as my best friend and a kind husband. But now I see. This is their true nature. If that's the case, so be it. Dorothy. Brian. I have my pride too. And I won't let you trample on it. Bring it on, Dorothy. I'm Karen. 29 years old. I started a small business with Dorothy and Brian, whom I met in college. We call it a handyman service, but mostly we do household chores for others. When we started, there were no other employees, so we managed all the work between the three of us. During that time, Brian proposed to me. I liked him back, so I happily accepted his proposal. Dorothy congratulated us. How kind they both seemed. I thought I was truly blessed with such friends, until the moment I heard this rumor. Dorothy also had feelings for Brian. I'm off, see you. Be careful on your way. Brian said to Dorothy in a light tone as she was leaving for work. You get lost easily. I'm fine. I've been to this client's place several times. The car navigation system knows the way perfectly. Dorothy said confidently. Laughter broke out among the employees. Dorothy was everyone's favorite. Ever since college, she was smart but had her ditzy moments, and they loved her for her goofy character. I liked Dorothy too. We hit it off right after entering college and dreamed of starting our own business. Brian joined us midway, and our dream began to take a more concrete shape. And now, here we are, living that dream. Brian, you should go with her, I'm worried. Ah, Karen, you sure are demanding. Brian shrugged his shoulders as if he was reluctant. The employees still looked amused. Eventually, an older employee named Jennifer agreed to accompany Dorothy. To be honest, I was a bit uncomfortable around Jennifer. So when she was out of sight, I felt a slight sense of relief. Of course, I would never intend to discriminate against any employee. But Jennifer clearly disliked me. It was obvious. I don't know why. Jennifer was bad-mouthing you again. One of the employees whispered to me. It was during break time. I sighed. I don't mind. It's nothing new. But she was saying awful things. Something like Brian was Dorothy's boyfriend and that you stole him. What? I dropped the documents I was holding. They scattered across the table. As I hurriedly gathered them up, I tried to muster a smile. That's terrible. Brian has only ever been interested in me. But according to Jennifer, Brian and Dorothy were the real couple, and I was just in the way. But it was Brian who confessed his feelings to me, and Dorothy never said anything about it. It must be just another baseless rumor. Why does Jennifer always speak ill of you? I don't know. All I could do was shake my head. Jennifer is 63, a veteran among the staff. All I knew was that she lived with her eldest son and his wife after her husband passed away. Just an ordinary woman. So why does she dislike me? Why spread such awful lies? I don't understand. I don't know how to deal with it because I don't understand. Of course, she wasn't always like this. When did it start? Right, it was. On the way home from a welcome party for Jennifer, which was also a get-together with booze. Maybe it was that day. That day? You know, Dorothy is a lightweight. She suddenly started crying that day. Jennifer was comforting and encouraging her, and it started the day after that. Jennifer was a normal woman. But after that day, she began to dislike me. Why? Oh, that makes sense. Another employee, who had been doing paperwork, chimed in. It's well known among us.
Dorothy badmouths you when she's drunk.
What? I blinked in shock.
Hey, that was supposed to be a secret. It's not something that can be hidden forever. Karen, you better be careful around Dorothy. Although, Jennifer is the only one taking the gossip seriously as for now.
The male employee said languidly and returned to his work. I was overwhelmed with disbelief. Dorothy, speaking ill of me.
Yes.
The first employee spoke again, looking uncomfortable.
Dorothy starts talking the moment you're out of sight. It's all made-up stories, terrible gossip.
No way. I thought this must be some kind of joke. Dorothy is my best friend. I can't believe she would say bad things about me.
But the worst part is Brian. Brian?
I wondered why Brian was being brought up in this context. As my expression darkened, the employee continued with difficulty.
Brian, no matter how awful things Dorothy says, he just laughs and seems to enjoy it, even egging her on.
That can't be true. I had stood up from my chair. I picked up my mobile phone. I called Dorothy.
Hello.
Hey, stop joking around now. What joke?
Apparently Jennifer is badmouthing me because of you. That's a horrible story, right?
Well. Dorothy paused, seemingly deep in thought. I was hoping she would quickly declare her innocence. Dorothy wouldn't betray me.
Hey, Dorothy.
What? It was Dorothy's usual, cheerful voice. I felt relieved. After all, what the employees said must be false. Jennifer must have badmouthed me so persistently that everyone started to make up this joke. Seriously.
So you found out all of it?
Huh? I blurted out in a daze. What did Dorothy just say?
I was planning to gradually increase my allies, but no one else fell for it except Jennifer. Maybe it's time to try something different.
Dorothy, what are you talking about?
Just kidding.
Wait, what? The next moment, Dorothy burst out laughing.
Don't take it seriously, we're friends, right? I would never do such a thing.
Right. I slumped back into my chair, feeling drained. The employees looked at me anxiously. Dorothy was laughing on the other end of the phone. Innocent and lovely Dorothy. She was like everyone's idol. Even now, she's popular among the employees. I like her, too. I thought I did.
It was all a lie, right?
Yes, all lies. Dorothy's affirmation. Jennifer's attitude, and the employees' rumors. I couldn't tell what was true anymore.
About Jennifer.
I hesitated. Honestly, I didn't want to talk about it. But Jennifer's attitude towards me was strange. I intended to discuss it with Dorothy and Brian.
What's up? She's very harsh towards me. I just think it's going to be hard to work with her moving forward.
You're not thinking of firing her, are you? Brian looked at me sternly. Dorothy's smile had faded too. I was unable to look into their eyes, and I looked down.
But her gossiping is crossing the line. It must be hard being talked about like that.
Dorothy seemed to sympathize with me. She's kind after all, I thought. Then Dorothy said,
"But it's funny to watch, isn't it?" What? Nothing. Karen, think it over. Jennifer is our ace employee, and we've worked together for so long. It would be too cruel to fire her now. I think so too.
Their opinions were the exact opposite of mine. Indeed, many clients have specifically requested Jennifer. Plus, Jennifer was the first employee we hired after starting the company. I have some kind of attachment to her too. But,
like I said before, Jennifer's harshness towards me is because of Dorothy. There are rumors about that. If it's not just me, but Dorothy's reputation falls too.
That's unavoidable,
Dorothy said with a troubled expression.
Because, well, it's the truth. Dorothy. I sighed. Lately, Dorothy has been teasing me excessively. She's manipulating Jennifer to take my place.
even though that can't possibly be true.
Really, Karen, you're too nice,
Brian suddenly said. I looked at him in surprise, and Brian had a smile on his face. A very unpleasant smile. What Dorothy is saying is true. I was dating Dorothy. Brian, not you too. But along the way, he got greedy. You were better in both grades and popularity. If anyone was to be the boss, it had to be you. So Brian left me for you, Karen. They took turns speaking. Words I didn't want to hear.
Stop it.
But Karen, you're too naive, aren't you? With that attitude, you can't compete with the cunning folks in other companies.
Stop it,
I shouted. My throat hurt from suddenly raising my voice. As I rubbed my throat, Dorothy started laughing. Just admit it, Karen. It's all true. I've been feeding Jennifer all this, and she's been taking it seriously. I began to tremble at her words.
It's crazy. That's just crazy. Why would you do such thing?
Why? It's obvious, isn't it? Dorothy said, curling her lips.
You stole Brian from me. Not just that. In school, you were always above me in grades. It was always like that. Because of you, I could never be the first.
But Dorothy, you were chosen as the most beautiful girl in college.
That was because I worked hard to please everyone and put on a friendly face. But what about you, Karen? Without any effort, you made it into the top 10. Don't joke with me. Who's joking now?
I had forgotten about the pain in my throat. Tears were streaming from both eyes. How disgusting. Crying like that.
Exactly. Dorothy's face is still the best. I made a mistake in choosing a partner.
Yes, indeed. Dorothy briefly glared at Brian, probably despising him for his opportunistic nature. But the next moment, she turned a sweet smile and voice to Brian. Come back to me, Brian. No. Dorothy, what are you saying? Right, even without Karen, the company can go on. Maybe, Dorothy, you should be the president, and I can assist you.
You don't want to be the president yourself?
I don't want a role that just dumps responsibilities on me. I'm more suited to being number 2. Brian said this casually. This is nonsense. A nightmare. I need to wake up quickly. I can't endure this any longer. As I was crouching and crying, Dorothy suddenly said, Hey, Karen. If you think you've done anything bad to me, I'll give you a chance to atone. Atone? What sin do I have? About Brian? I really didn't know. But if it's true, I feel sorry. The moment I looked up. Give me this company and Brian, Dorothy said, smiling. Your husband and I are taking over the business. We'll take the sales and employees. The two of them laughed triumphantly. It was a terrifying smirk. I finally understood. They had been planning on using me all along and to kick me out of the company once I'm no longer needed. Thanks for your hard work until now. But we don't need you anymore. Brian and I can manage on our own. That's right. I'm remarrying Dorothy, so I don't need you anymore. Their words made something inside me snap. They really had the nerve to say whatever they wanted. I have my pride too. To be trampled on so cruelly. I won't just walk away quietly. Silently, I glared at them. Then, it was my turn to smile at them.
Suit yourselves.
Oh, how magnanimous of you. I slipped past the two of them and walked away. Dorothy still looked proud. She must think I'm being docile out of a sense of defeat. Let her interpret it however she wants. We're not friends anymore, anyway.
Brian, I'll write up the divorce papers.
Just like that? Brian seemed a bit taken aback. No regrets? You don't fully understand my charm?
Whatever.
Dorothy crossed her legs, looking pleased with herself. I turned back to them and said,
Now, I can go to France without any worries. Huh? Dorothy let out a surprised exclamation. France? What's that about? I got a job offer from a company there. I was turning it down because I was responsible for our company. But I guess that doesn't matter anymore. Yeah. Go wherever you want. After saying that, Dorothy added in a lower voice. What company is it, may I ask? It is. I gave them the name. It was a globally renowned corporation that even children would know in this era. Dorothy's voice and expression grew frantic. Why are you being scouted and not me? I didn't get any offers. Neither did I. Brian added, looking puzzled. Brian, you're just a freebie. Dorothy bluntly stated. Seriously? Brian looked dejected, but in reality, Dorothy and I were the ones who started the business. Brian was more like an assistant, or something like that. He was always like a little chick following behind. Even for Brian, it seems, was upset by Dorothy's manner of speaking. Dorothy, you weren't invited either. That's right. Karen and I were a team. We've been through everything together, so why is it that Karen is the only one getting attention from big companies? I should mention. I said, exasperated. Dorothy might have been doing the publicity and noticeable work, but the important, behind-the-scenes work? That was all me. Like sending emails to clients, for example. Dorothy couldn't be bothered, but I made sure to send a thank you email to every customer. Partly hoping they would use our services again, but mostly because I was happy they chose our company. I kept sending emails, expressing my gratitude. Then, one day, one of the clients replied. Their grandchild works for the company we just mentioned, and they talked about my work. That led to them wanting to meet me. Come to think of it, you went to France alone last month. Brian said, suddenly realizing. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Well, I thought it was just a trip. Brian seemed to be making excuses. Dorothy looked furious. Until just now, she thought she had one. But again, it turned out to be my victory. That's why I'm going to France. I waved my hand and left the office. I heard Dorothy's screams, but I could care less. After signing the divorce papers as agreed, I arranged for a moving company. Oh, right. I came up with an idea. I called another company on my mobile phone. Hello. I'd like to sell all the furniture in my house. I'm used to negotiating. I wrapped up the conversation efficiently. Then, there was a noise at the door. Brian had returned. Hey, Karen. What is it? This house, you bought it, but if you're going to France, you won't need it, right? So, it's fine. I've already arranged to sell the furniture and the house, I said cheerfully. Brian screamed. Why would you do such a thing? Where am I supposed to live from tomorrow? Go stay with Dorothy, I said bluntly. I was a bit surprised by my own words. I realized I had no feelings left for Brian. You're not selling the company too, are you? That's impossible. Dorothy, my co-owner, would need to agree. Right. Brian nodded, relieved. From tomorrow, Dorothy will be running the company alone. Be careful. Dorothy doesn't do anything troublesome. Your threat won't work on me. I'm just warning you, I said and went to the kitchen. I'll make dinner. What? Until the divorce is finalized, we are still married. And I have no intention of shirking my duties as a wife. I've always made meals every day. No matter how busy, I never neglected my household duties. That was my pride. Though today would be the last time I'd cook for Brian. Well, then. Tonight's dinner is beef stew. I splurged a little on some good meat this time. I sautéed it with onions and butter, carefully. With tomato salad and juice, tonight's dinner was ready. We ate facing each other. There was hardly any conversation.
But the words Brian said strangely stayed with me.
This is the last time I'll eat your cooking, Karen. Did you like it? It was okay.
Brian, ever childish, never praised my cooking until the end. Yet, I was content. I had remained a good wife till the end. The next day, after confirming the divorce papers were processed, I headed to the office. There was a buzz of activity inside. As I entered, one of the employees approached me.
Karen, is it true you're being forced out of the company?
It's true. I explained again that I was leaving the company and heading to France alone. A murmur spread among the employees.
Karen is amazing, as expected. Karen, we can't run the company without you. I'm quitting this company.
Don't say that. I tried to calm them. But, except for one, they all insisted on quitting. I'll stay. Of course, it was Jennifer who said that. The youngest employee looked at Jennifer accusingly. I stopped them just as they were about to speak. Instead, I spoke.
Jennifer.
Yes? Her reply was curt, as I had grown accustomed to. In fact, thinking I wouldn't hear her voice again made me somewhat sad.
Dorothy is flashy and loves attention. Brian is indecisive and rarely takes initiative. Please take care of those two. That's what I was planning to.
Jennifer glanced at me and nodded, as if she had figured it out all along.
Even if I'm the only employee left, I will support them. I'm not like the other ungrateful employees. What did you say?
Stop. I held them back while looking around the office. I had done well to grow the company this far. What would become of it now, losing all employees except Jennifer? I wouldn't be there to see it anyways.
Karen! What are you doing in our company?
Dorothy's voice rang out. This place was no longer mine. Her footsteps were my cue to leave the office. Next, I headed to a restaurant arranged by the client, and their grandchild waiting for me. We parted with smiles. But I didn't take up their offer. I still had things to do in Japan.
What do you think you're doing?
Dorothy barged into my office while I was working. I looked at her face while sitting.
What? Karen, weren't you going to France? Why are you starting a business in America?
That's right. In the end, I didn't go to France. Instead, I decided to start over in America. The reason was simple.
How could I leave the employees who admire me in a difficult situation? So, you poach our employees and then act like it's nothing.
I didn't poach anyone.
They came to me because they couldn't work under you, Dorothy.
As they declared, all employees except Jennifer quit Dorothy's company. I couldn't just abandon them and go to France alone. I felt obligated to provide them a stable working environment again.
Jennifer is there for you. One person can't cover everything. And Brian is useless. Isn't managing a part of your job as a president?
I replied nonchalantly. Dorothy groaned, at a loss for words. I sighed and closed my laptop.
Dorothy, it's not bad to want things. People need ambition. Whether it's born from an inferiority complex or a motivation, I think it's okay. Are you lecturing me? That's not the point. As a president, Dorothy, you have a duty to keep Brian and Jennifer away from difficult situations. And of course, if the business fails, it will affect you too. It would make me sad. That company is like a child to me. I know that.
Dorothy bit her lip.
But I don't know what to do. Jobs that were coming in smoothly are now reducing. The online reviews are terrible. They write it was better with the former president. Customers are honest.
I shrugged.
Do you send thank you emails to your customers? Are you polite to them at work? Stop nagging!
Dorothy got angry. Such a child. I was amazed at my lack of judgment. Or maybe Dorothy just fooled me well. Probably both. Before showing her true nature, Dorothy seemed kind and graceful. Who knew she was this selfish and childish? Brian seems lost too. Another email. After Dorothy left crying, I opened my laptop again. There was an email from Brian. I didn't even need to check it. He was probably asking if he could join my company, maybe even hinting at reconciliation. How selfish can a man be? Doesn't he feel ashamed to be dependent on a woman? Brian and Dorothy broke up, it seems. A female employee said, bringing a cup of tea. Is that so? They never remarried. As soon as Brian heard about you starting a new business, he initiated the breakup. I heard from him directly. I propped my chin on my hand. I needed to meet Brian to clear things up. That weekend, I called Brian to a cafe near the company. He looked happy and was overly considerate. It's been a while. How have you been? Yes, well. If only you and Dorothy in front of me could get it together, I'd feel more at ease. But Brian's attitude suggested that was unlikely. The food tastes better when I'm looking at your face, Karen. Oh, but the food you cooked was even better. Is that so? Even though he never once praised my cooking while we were married. I checked my watch and said shortly, I have no intention of remarrying you, nor hiring you at my company. Don't say that. For the sake of our past as a couple. We're no longer a couple. I dismissed Brian's wishful thinking. Well then, I'll be going. Wait! If you persist, I might have to consult a lawyer. What? At the mention of a lawyer, Brian looked frightened. Good. Cowardly Brian wouldn't have the nerve to bother me further. I paid for my share and decided to return to the office. Brian, holding his wallet, shouted, You called me here and you want to split the bills? Are you offering to pay the full amount? Leaving a groaning Brian behind, I left the cafe. Unfortunately, the company Dorothy ran went under. Poor reviews and her attitude drove customers away. It's a pity for Jennifer, who lost her job, but it couldn't be helped. Please, hire me at your company. Please, I beg you. Now, they are both bowing their heads to me. After all their arrogance towards me, what could you possibly say to me? Please leave. I said very politely, yet distantly. There's no place for you here. It's because you started a rival company. Dorothy exposed her true self again. Brian was shocked, but Dorothy kept shouting. I know all our customers went to your place. I didn't lead them there. I spoke in a soothing tone. Both the employees and the customers made their choices on their own. Do you think I alone could influence so many people? Dorothy knew the truth deep down. What was right and what was wrong. The mistake of driving me out of the company. Her failure to take her duty as president seriously. It all comes down to one thing, people's trust. Now, both of you, please leave. If you continue to make a scene, I'll have to call the police. No way! Brian cried out in pain, while Dorothy cradled her head and crouched down. Leaving those two behind, I returned to my work. There are customers and employees waiting for me. I can't afford to stop. Anthony. That's the name of the person who introduced me to the large corporation. He works there himself and has started contacting me regularly since then. I enjoy talking to him a lot. Informative, and his choice of words is laced with humor. I'm glad I got to know you, Karen. He wrote in one of his emails, in a heartfelt tone. It's been a while since I've had a Japanese friend, being abroad. Friend. That word pained my heart. I was betrayed by those I thought were my closest friends. But I emerged victorious. I'm not weak enough to be outdone and left behind. That incident made me realize my strength. After some hesitation, I replied, I'm also glad to have met you, Anthony. If you ever come back to America, let me know. I'd be happy to have a meal together. I still can't use the word friend. It's not Anthony, but the word friend I'm wary of. Yet, I'm confident.
That soon I can call Anthony a friend. I can't be rude to someone who opens their heart to me. Especially when I'm starting to trust Anthony. Speaking of trust, the same goes for my employees. I am still grateful to them for believing in me and following me. Karen. Yes, yes. Responding to the puppyish call, I stand up from my chair, feeling myself naturally giving a smile on my face.
Hey, the baby seems to have something to say. Lynn, my 8-year-old niece, said this while glancing sideways at my eldest son, Kyle.
What are you talking about? A baby can't talk.
Kyle, thinking it's just a child's nonsense, laughed off what Lynn said, but both my sister Isabella and I looked at Lynn as if remembering something. Our grandson Liam blinked his large eyes several times and looked up at me and Isabella as if he had something urgent to convey. It's not a lie. I can hear this child's voice. Despite being ridiculed by Kyle, Lynn stared back at him with teary eyes, as if it were her mission to convey the baby's words. Ashley, my son's wife, watched this scene in astonishment.
Well then, what is he saying? I'll listen, especially for you.
Kyle shot a disdainful look at Lynn, a gaze far too severe for a little child. Kyle cast a disdainful look at Lynn. It was a harsh gaze, one that shouldn't be directed at a small child. I'm Jessie. I'm currently 50 years old, living with my husband Jameson, an office worker, and our dog Milk. Up until 7 years ago, our eldest son Kyle lived with us. After graduating from junior college and starting work at a factory, Kyle moved out to live independently. Kyle has always been rebellious, often disobeying us. Even when the stern Jameson admonished him, he wouldn't listen and occasionally ended up in the care of the public due to his antics outside. Each time this happened, Jameson and I would apologize profusely and scold Kyle. However, it seemed neither upsetting others nor police warnings bothered Kyle. He repeatedly caused similar troubles. As a child, Kyle was like the young boss of the neighborhood, dominating his elementary school friends. It was somewhat cute back then, but as he grew up, his delinquent behavior escalated, causing injuries and inconveniences to others, leaving us, the Jamesons, at a loss for what to do. We even considered sending him to a rehabilitation center before he finished junior college. However, when he landed a job at a respectable company upon graduation, we were overjoyed, hoping he was finally turning into a responsible adult. As a working professional, whether due to being busy or a change of heart, Kyle no longer got us called to the police station like before. Living on his own, he seemed to have taken up household responsibilities, perhaps indicating a change for the better. Anyway, Jameson and I finally felt relieved from the sternest task of parenting. It was 2 years ago that Kyle brought home Ashley, saying he wanted to marry her. Kyle was 25 then, although it seemed early for marriage by societal standards. We who never expected the once wayward Kyle to settle down properly were ecstatic about his announcement.
This is Ashley, the woman I'm marrying. Picked her up around town.
I was a bit concerned about Kyle referring to his future wife as this dude, but I didn't point it out since his poor choice of words wasn't new. Nice to meet you, Ashley. Ashley, the woman Kyle brought home, was slender, beautiful, had a modest demeanor that showed respect for Kyle, almost the epitome of a wife. I'm Kyle's mom, Jessie. Nice to meet you. Pleased to meet you, too. Ashley greeted us quietly and reservedly. I wondered what Ashley saw in Kyle, but maybe he had impressive qualities that he didn't show us.
We're planning to get married next month.
Kyle reported this in a casual tone. His usual confidence didn't prompt any particular concern from Jameson or me. If they had decided together, there was no need for us to interfere.
By the way, the other day at work,
Kyle quickly wrapped up the marriage announcement and started talking casually about his work. Most of it was him bragging about how he had saved the day at work or taking the blame for a subordinate's mistake. While we listened half-heartedly, Ashley nodded along solemnly to Kyle's stories. I could see why Kyle was smitten with someone who listened so attentively. It was impressive how Ashley didn't tire of listening to Kyle's endless self-praise rather than discussing her own matters. Ultimately, Kyle's marriage announcement ended up being mostly about him talking about himself. While Kyle was in the restroom, I couldn't help but ask Ashley how she was holding up. "Are you okay, Ashley? He talks about himself a lot, doesn't he?" "No, I'm used to it. It's fine. Really." Ashley gestured as if to reassure me, indicating it was no big deal. "If you ever need anything, just let me know. We're family now." "Thank you very much." I noticed tears welling up in the polite Ashley's eyes, which surprised me. "Oh, sorry. Just some dust," she said, wiping the corner of her eye. Perhaps she was experiencing some post-wedding blues. I remembered feeling overwhelmed when I first met my in-laws to announce my marriage. That day, I watched Ashley leave our house with a sense of nostalgia. To think Kyle would end up with such a wonderful wife, I can finally breathe easy.
Indeed, it's been a long journey, but well done to us both.
Jameson and I celebrated our shared memory of parenting Kyle, and we enjoyed some fine wine that night. We got a bit more tipsy than usual and headed to bed early. 2 years have passed since Kyle and Ashley got married, and earlier this year, they welcomed a baby boy. His name is Liam, and from the photos, he looks like a strong baby with features resembling Ashley's. However, Jameson and I haven't met Liam yet. Whenever I contact Kyle about meeting him,
"I've been really busy lately. Ashley doesn't want us to, so please stop asking."
he was reluctant to agree. Initially, we hesitated to visit right after Ashley gave birth, thinking it would be too much for her, but even after several months, we received no affirmative response from Kyle. Finally, Jameson and I couldn't wait any longer and decided to visit their home secretly. It was a bright Sunday afternoon. "Hello?" Kyle and Ashley lived in a rental apartment located about a 40-minute drive from our house in a somewhat secluded area. When I rang the doorbell, Ashley opened the door. "Jesse and Jameson, what brings you here?" Ashley, whom we hadn't seen in a while, looked somewhat frightened upon seeing us. She looked thinner than before. Perhaps gaunt would be more accurate description. Sorry for the sudden visit. We just really want to see Liam's face. We couldn't wait any longer. Is it okay now?" Yes. Please come in." We hesitantly asked, thinking it might be a busy time for her, but surprisingly, Ashley let us in easily. As soon as we entered the house, we noticed the smell of cigarette smoke. Jameson frowned. I was also shocked to smell tobacco in a house with a baby. However, without mentioning it, I proceeded further into the room. Finding Liam asleep in the crib in the living room, both Jameson and I smiled. He stirred slightly but continued sleeping. "He's adorable." "Thank you." Ashley's tired face brightened into a slight smile. "Is Kyle not around today?" "Yes, he's out with friends." "Oh dear, leaving you and Liam behind?" "It's usual for him." Her response hinted at Kyle's habit of going out on his days off. I wondered if this was a regular occurrence. Is Kyle helping with the parenting? I noticed the smell of cigarette smoke earlier. Is that from Kyle? Ashley didn't answer. She just looked down. Her silence spoke volumes, and I felt a deep sadness. That's terrible. I'll talk to him, tell him to be more supportive. Please don't. I was taken aback by her clear refusal. I had intended to confront Kyle about neglecting his responsibilities, given Ashley's evident exhaustion, but perhaps she saw it as meddling. "I appreciate your concern, but I don't want him to think I complain." Oh dear, Ashley feared being blamed if I complained to Kyle about his behavior. "But doesn't that make it hard for you?" "I'm fine, so please don't say anything to him." Left with Ashley's firm request, Jameson and I were at a loss for words. "Understood, but please, if anything comes up, don't hesitate to talk to us. We're here to help." "Thank you." I knew that Ashley had grown up in a single mother's home and that her mom was currently hospitalized. That meant aside from Kyle, Jameson and I were the only family she could rely on. I wanted to do anything I could to help make life a little easier for Ashley. Our conversation continued and my heart ached as I listened to her talk about Kyle's careless lifestyle and his terrible attitude towards her. I hadn't realized that Kyle had been treating Ashley so badly in the time we hadn't seen her. Despite Ashley's refusal, I secretly resolved to confront Kyle if he continued to behave poorly. A week after Jameson and I visited Ashley to check on her, Jameson had to work on his day off, so that Saturday, Isabella and her 8-year-old daughter Lynn came over to our house to play. I've always had a close relationship with Isabella, and we frequently get together like this even now that we are adults. However, it had been half a year since I last saw Isabella. When they arrived, Isabella and Lynn first petted our dog Milk. Lynn, who didn't usually interact with dogs, looked curiously at Milk. "Isn't she cute?" Isabella remarked. "Yeah." Lynn nodded earnestly. Then I served coffee to Isabella and Lynn, and we caught up on each other's lives. Unlike me, a housewife, Isabella worked part-time and shared some complaints about her boss. It was probably one of her few chances to vent her stress. I listened to Isabella's stories, nodding sympathetically. Meanwhile, Lynn, who had been playing with Milk, suddenly turned towards us and stared at me with her big eyes. "What's up, Lynn?" When I asked, Lynn began, "Well, you see, Milk says, thank you for always taking care of me, but she also says she wants more frequent baths. Not once a month, but maybe once a week." "Oh, what?" I was bewildered by Lynn suddenly speaking on behalf of Milk. Looking at Isabella, she seemed surprised, saying, "Oh dear." It's common for young children to pretend to talk to animals, but mentioning specific details about the frequency of shampooing was puzzling. Moreover, the once-a-month schedule was accurate. I did want to bathe Milk more often, but recently I have been too busy. Lynn, did Milk really tell you that?" "Yes, she looked like she wanted to talk, so I asked her. At first, I thought Lynn was either lying or imagining things. But then Isabella said, this isn't the first time something like this has happened." I was shocked when she started to explain. Once, despite the weather forecast predicting a sunny day, she insisted that a storm was coming and that we should stay home. We didn't have any plans, so we stayed in. Sure enough, as Lynn predicted, the weather turned foul, with signs flying around outside. We were glad we didn't go out. "That's incredible." "There's more. She found my lost car keys immediately, and like now, she talks to dogs during walks. No one believes us, but I know she has some extraordinary ability." Isabella said this while patting Lynn's head. If what Isabella said was true, then I too believe that Lynn might have some unique ability. It was unbelievable, but having witnessed Lynn's ability firsthand, I couldn't help but believe it. After speaking for Milk, Lynn seemed satisfied and returned to playing with her normally. "How about you, sis? How have you been lately?" As I glanced at Lynn, Isabella's question reminded me of last week's events. "Actually, I met Liam for the first time the other day. I shared everything I saw at Kyle and Ashley's home with Isabella. How Kyle left his wife and child at home to go out on Sundays, his smoking habit, and his demeaning attitude towards Ashley. With every detail, I saw Isabella's brows furrow in concern. "That's awful. Kyle has always been a handful, but I thought he was doing better recently." "Yes, but it seems I was mistaken. It's just too sad for Ashley if things continue like this." "Indeed, and worrying. How about we go visit Ashley together next time? Maybe we can help somehow? Of course, we'll let her know in advance." "All right, I'll ask her." The following weekend, Isabella, Lynn, and I visited Kyle and Ashley's home again. After informing Ashley beforehand, we learned Kyle was out again, which worked out well. However, I still couldn't help but feel uneasy about Kyle regularly leaving his family on his days off. "Hello, Ashley, sorry to come by again." "No, it's fine. It's just me and the little ones, so anytime is good." Hello." It had been about 2 years since Isabella and Lynn last saw Ashley at a family meeting, so it was quite a reunion. Lynn greeted softly, and then ran over to Liam, who was lying in bed, gently stroking his head. She seemed to like the baby. We watched Lynn's interaction and then sat down at the dining table. Ashley appeared even more exhausted from childcare and housework than before. Isabella frowned at this, her gaze full of sympathy. How has Kyle been since then? No change. He yells at me to stay home if I try to go out, and he freely drinks and smokes. Whenever I try to object, he shouts, "Who do you think is earning the living for this family?" As she spoke, tears welled up in Ashley's eyes. Isabella offered her a handkerchief. That's unbelievable. I feel like doing something to get back at him. I was infuriated by Kyle's appalling behavior. If only we could find some leverage against him, something that could even involve the police. Isabella muttered this, and Ashley suddenly gasped as if remembering something. It's not police related, but recently someone came to our house for debt collection. It was when Kyle wasn't home, so I was confused and said it must be a mistake, but they insisted.
This is Kyle's house, right?
What? That happened? Ashley, do you have any debts? No, I don't. The house is rented and there is no loan or anything like that. Isabella and I exchanged glances, puzzled about what this could mean. Could Kyle be incurring debts without Ashley's knowledge, unable to repay them? While doubts swirled in my mind, I was searching for words to respond.
I lost again today. Just my luck.
The sound of the front door being roughly opened, followed by Kyle's voice, made everyone's face freeze.
What is Mom here?
Kyle, glaring at me, reminded me of his rebellious and delinquent days. I'm sorry for intruding like this. We were just worried about Ashley. Kyle was surprised to see not only me, but also his aunt Isabella and his cousin Lynn. Relieved to see only family members, he demanded Ashley bring him some alcohol. Ashley hurried to the kitchen. There's no more alcohol left.
What? I don't care. It's the wife's job to replenish it when it runs out, right?
I'm sorry. Ashley shrank under Kyle's arrogant demeanor like a king in his court. I couldn't help myself. Kyle, wait a minute. I shouted, but Kyle didn't even glance at me, just kept glaring at Ashley. I was searching for a way to discipline Kyle when Liam started crying in his crib. Ashley quickly looked up, about to go to Liam, but Kyle's fierce glare made her freeze in place. I exchanged glances with Isabella, trying to communicate silently for a solution. It was at that moment, it was then that Lynn, who had been watching Liam, spoke up. Hey, the baby seems to have something to say. Lynn said this while casting a sideways glance at Kyle.
What? You kidding? Babies can't talk.
Kyle, thinking it was just child's play, laughed out when Lynn said, but both Isabella and I looked at Lynn as if suddenly remembering something. Liam blinked his large eyes several times, looking at me and Isabella as if he had something urgent to say. It's not a lie. I can hear what he's saying. Even though Kyle ridiculed her, Lynn, with tears in her eyes, stared at him as if it was her mission to convey the baby's words. Ashley watched the scene in astonishment.
Well then, what is he saying? I'll listen, especially for you.
Kyle cast a disdainful look at Lynn. Such a gaze was certainly not appropriate for a small child. I watched tensely, waiting for Lynn to speak next. He says, Daddy is planning something bad. Mommy, don't be fooled. At Lynn's words, Kyle's shoulders slightly shook for a moment. Ashley looked shocked. Isabella and I quickly realized that Lynn was about to demonstrate her mysterious ability. Lynn, what do you mean? I urged Lynn to tell us more in detail. Lynn paused with an then continued. He says, Daddy writes secrets in a notebook and always hides it behind the bookshelf. Also, I love Mommy. Daddy is scary. And he's crying. After saying this, Lynn scanned the room and then ran over to the bookshelf at the end of the living room. Ashley shivered upon hearing Lynn's words. Lynn pulled out about 3 books from the shelf and seemed to find a small notebook hidden behind them, which she handed to Isabella. This is it. Kyle's face turned pale upon seeing the small notebook. Lynn handed over. Isabella, observing Kyle and Ashley's reactions, opened the notebook. This is a life insurance policy. The insured is Ashley and Kyle is listed as the beneficiary? There's even a contract attached. Ashley's face turned pale, and I took the notebook from Isabella to see its contents. As Isabella had said, it detailed a life insurance policy for over $1 million on Ashley, along with a contract. I couldn't believe my eyes. Kyle, what is the meaning of this? I had known Kyle to often engage in delinquent behavior, but I never imagined he would do something so cruel to his own wife. I glared at Kyle. I wanted to confront him about this life insurance policy right away.
I had to. I'm out of money. Besides, everyone takes out life insurance, right? It's not like I was planning to do anything to Ashley.
Kyle rattled off excuses as if unrepentant. The story of debts Ashley mentioned corroborated his lack of money. It's pretty clear what he was spending his earnings on, even without asking. Given Kyle's habit of leaving his wife and child almost daily to go out and play, he probably squandered the money on pointless fun. Normally, people take out insurance on themselves, right? Secretly taking out a life insurance policy on Ashley and pretending ignorance is wrong. Kyle stumbled over his words at my pointed remark. Then, as if to add to the attack, Lynn spoke up again. The baby told me he said Daddy was talking to himself about stealing money from the company and getting fired, and he's planning to do something bad to Mommy to get money. What? I couldn't help but raise my voice at Lynn's words. Fired from the company? Then what had he been doing on weekdays during the day? Turning, I saw Ashley too, staring at Kyle in shock.
What are you talking about? There is no proof.
Kyle spat at Lynn in contempt. I stepped in front of Lynn and unleashed all my pent-up anger. Proof? Lynn has just told you everything. She understands what babies see, and it's no coincidence she found this notebook. Everything Lynn says is true. You have seen the life insurance contract with your own eyes. Stop making excuses and apologize to Ashley. I scolded Kyle furiously, more than I ever had before. It pained me to know that my son could do something so terrible to his wife. He had boasted about covering for his subordinates' misdeeds at work, but the real wrongdoer was himself. It was shameful and sickening that my own son could stoop so low.
This is ridiculous.
Kyle scratched his head and twisted his face in frustration, but it was all his own doing, and no one felt sympathy for him. My reprimand seemed to give Ashley the courage to speak up, having been silent until then. I never imagined I was being treated so terribly. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Pay off your debts yourself. Goodbye. Ashley left those words behind, grabbed Liam, and rushed out of the house. We watched in stunned silence. With Ashley gone, Kyle,
this is a joke,
he muttered in complaint, but after being thoroughly scolded by Isabella and me, he finally slumped his shoulders. Although it was an unexpected turn of events that Ashley left, I felt it was good that Kyle's misdeeds were exposed. Looking at Lynn, she seemed to have said all she wanted to and appeared content. I'm hungry, she said, stretching. Shall we go get something to eat? Well, we'll be heading off now. Isabella, Lynn, and I left Kyle's house. It wouldn't be surprising if debt collectors showed up at this house at any time. I wasn't Ashley, but I also thought I would never return to this house again.
Why?
Kyle was still yelling as we closed the front door, but we ignored his pathetic voice and left the apartment. A few days later, worried about Ashley, I contacted her. Sorry to worry you. I have gone back to my grandparents' house. Please, feel free to visit Liam any time. Hearing that she was safe brought relief. Ashley had sent divorce papers to Kyle soon after that day. Kyle was initially reluctant to agree to divorce, but when Ashley firmly insisted she wouldn't let him see their child unless they divorced, he finally gave in and the divorce was finalized. Ashley mentioned she had returned to her grandparents' home as her mom was hospitalized and she was looking for a job. She planned to enroll Liam in a childcare center soon. Kyle's difficult days began thereafter, working as a part-timer every day to pay off his debts. Initially, he begged Jameson for money, but after hearing the full story, Jameson became furious.
Don't ever come back home,
he scolded Kyle harshly. As a result, Kyle stopped asking us for help. I don't feel sorry for him. He brought all this upon himself. As for me, just like Ashley suggested, I occasionally visit her grandparents' house to play with Liam. Despite the hardships Ashley endured because of Kyle, she and her family graciously welcomed us, including Isabella and Lynn, without any resentment. I can't help but respect Ashley and her family for their openness and kindness. Lynn, do you know what Liam just said? Yeah, I'm happy to play with Mommy and the grandparents. Really? That's wonderful. Ashley, who was oppressed by Kyle, turned out to be a genuinely nice, courteous person. That's why she still treats us without any prejudice. For me, this was more than enough.
You're the one who brought up divorce. It's only fair that you pay the alimony in the divorce trial, right?
What if I was cheating? Would you try to take more?
In today's world, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. Infidelity is a taboo, and that carries serious responsibility. You should definitely pay $100,000.
I no longer have any mercy for my husband, who puts himself first and berates me. I decided to isolate him from our relatives and make him truly disconnected from the real world. My name is Mary. I'm 27 years old. I married James, who's the same age as me. I took over a flower shop from my late dad and run it. In addition to running the flower shop, I also do floral arrangements for event venues. Just before graduating high school, my dad's health worsened, and I, as an only daughter, started helping with the family business. 2 years after I finally learned the ropes of the flower business, my dad passed away when I was 20, and I took over the shop. Then, perhaps, shocked by Dad's passing, my mom developed early onset dementia and had to be admitted to a care facility. However, at the time, individual flower shops that only sold fresh flowers were closing one after another. I had to earn enough not only for the shop but also for my mom's care facility fees, which worried me greatly. That's when I remembered my dad's will. Challenge yourself with something new every day. So when I took over the shop, I incorporated floral arrangements into the business, which wasn't very common at that time. I met my husband James through these floral arrangements. I was 22 when I handled the floral arrangements for the founding anniversary party of James's company. James was working in the general affairs department then and was in charge of the event's venue decoration. During the meetings for the venue decoration, I grew to appreciate James' sincere attitude. Thanks to our meticulous planning, the event decoration was well received and the party ended successfully. After the founding anniversary party, James confessed to me on our way back.
Mary, would you want to go out with me?
I said yes to his proposal and we started dating. After dating for about 2 years, we got married. But actually, when James proposed to me, I initially turned him down. I'm running a business on my own. Plus, even though my mom is in a care facility, she needs frequent visits for her dementia care. I can't do household chores and would be a burden to you, James. So I can't marry now. I turned him down because I couldn't do household chores well and didn't want to burden him. So I said I couldn't marry at that time. But James,
I love you, Mary. If you're that busy, I'll take care of everything at home. Let's get married,
he offered. I was so moved by this love that I agreed to marry him. However, about a month after we got married, James stopped keeping his promise to do all the household chores.
I've been transferred to the accounting department. There's no way I can do housework.
James started coming home late, saying he had more overtime. He often worked on weekends, and we barely saw each other. Thinking, James has been transferred. It must be hard for him. I need to do my part. I managed the housework in the little time I had after early morning purchases. But 6 months into our marriage, I found myself doing all the shopping, cooking, laundry, and cleaning. I reached my physical limit and was bedridden for about 3 days. Luckily, there were no flower arrangement jobs during those 3 days, so it didn't inconvenience the customers.
Realizing this could lead to a significant loss for me, I tried to discuss sharing household responsibilities with James. What? I never signed up to be a house husband, and I'm swamped with overtime. Are you trying to kill me? There was no room for discussion, but I was at a risk of collapsing too. I've got more big projects, and I haven't been able to visit Mom at the care facility. Can you help out a little? James seemed so averse to this conversation he couldn't wait for me to finish. Anyway, I have no intention of doing housework. That's a woman's job, right? So just do it. He ended the discussion unilaterally with an illogical reason. This is nothing like the promise we made before getting married. I'm busy too. Despite feeling the injustice, I decided to continue the marriage for the time being. However, James's overtime and weekend work continued even after 2 years. How can a big construction company have so much overtime and weekend work, even if it's the accounting department? James' company is a major firm with a strong adherence to laws. They shouldn't allow unreasonable overtime or weekend work beyond the legally defined hours. It's strange for a company to have such long overtime periods, right? Normally, prolonged overtime and weekend work would lead to fatigue and health issues, but there was no sign of that in James. Instead, he seemed quite relaxed, saying, "This weekend I have to play golf for a client meeting. It's annoying to do this on my day off." He even looked happy. What? Entertaining in the accounting department? That's unheard of. Something's fishy. I started to suspect James' unnatural overtime and weekend work. I need to investigate this. With these thoughts in mind, as I entered the second year of marriage, I hired a detective agency to investigate James. The day after I received the report from the year-long surveillance of James by the agency, I pretended to be doing early morning purchases so no one would disturb me and flipped through the report in the delivery van. It contained some shocking facts. First, although James had been transferred to the accounting department, he was hardly doing any overtime. What the heck? This is completely different from what he told me. I collapsed from the exhaustion because of this. But more shockingly, the detective's report revealed an affair. James had been cheating with a university student named Jennifer, who worked part-time in the General Affairs Department, even before we got married. And this affair had continued even after our marriage. What? So he was meeting this Jennifer woman during his supposed overtime and weekend work? This is outrageous! According to the report, this Jennifer is currently 23 years old, a university student working part-time as an office assistant in the General Affairs Department at James's company. The enclosed photos showed her as not exceptionally beautiful, but fair-skinned and slightly plump, the kind of woman that seems to appeal to men. She's in a 4-year college and had to repeat a year once for playing too much. She's still job hunting while working part-time. This woman, she's not just young. James, this can't be true. The report continued. The relationship with Jennifer started about 6 months before James and I got married, and Jennifer continued the relationship even knowing James was married. Moreover, she had a boyfriend and was still seeing him. That... hussy! I was trembling with rage as I read the report alone. Then came an even more shocking revelation. James had been driving me to my mom's care facility for visits. It was the only kindness I felt from him in his recent behavior. But even during those times when I was visiting Mom, James and Jennifer were enjoying their secret meetings in a hotel. To top it all off, the detective's report included audio recordings of their conversations. Hey, do you think your wife will bring up divorce soon? Yeah, she collapsed from overwork before, so she must be tired enough to bring divorce papers, right? So it's soon. I want to have a wedding abroad with the alimony we'll get. Yeah, where should we do it? Hawaii? Ew, that's so cliche. They must have been talking at some cafe. They betrayed me and planned to plunder the alimony from a divorce trial to fund their own marriage. The raw audio data conveyed the cruel reality more vividly than text, cutting deep into my heart. This can't be real. I never thought humans could be so greedy, cunning, and capable of such terrible things. I loved James for his sincerity. That's why this calculated and filthy act of betrayal hit me so hard that I was almost hyperventilating. As I curled up in the car until I could breathe normally, the sky that was dark when I started reading the report had brightened completely. I stared at the blue sky, so contrary to my turmoil, for a while. Once I had composed myself, I called my lawyer. After returning home, I immediately posted a temporarily closed sign at the entrance of my flower shop. When I went upstairs to the living area, James was in his pajamas, munching on toast and fiddling with his phone. "James, I need to talk to you."
"What? On my precious day off?"
After reading the detective report, I noticed James's attitude towards me had completely changed. He used to be so kind. Now he's just a tyrant.
"What? Looking for a fight first thing in the morning?"
About our life together, James. I've reached my limit. Do you understand what I'm saying? The moment James heard these words, he smirked in a nasty way that I didn't miss.
"I'm a bit confused. Can you clarify?"
All right. To be more clear, I want to break up with you. At this, James not only didn't hide his smirk, but looked down on me arrogantly.
"So you're saying you want a divorce?"
James, unaware that I knew of his shoddy plans, eagerly jumped at the divorce I initiated. With his calculated approach, he demanded a division of property and alimony.
"Since Mary wants a divorce, of course, I need compensation. So for the divorce of property, I'll take this house, which is also the atelier and shop, the car, and half of the savings, which is $100,000. Plus for the alimony, another $50,000, and a restraining order with a $1,000 fine each time it's violated."
While presenting the completed divorce papers, he said,
"You're the one who brought up the divorce. It's only fair that you pay the alimony in the divorce trial, right?"
The betrayal of the last 2 years and this inhumane behavior towards me caused me a headache and ringing in my ears. Stunned by the extreme treatment from my spouse, I whispered in my head, "I'm tired," and then asked James one question. "What if I was cheating? Would you try to take more?" From a very condescending position, James retorted,
"Oh, yes. In this day and age, gender doesn't matter. Infidelity is forbidden, right? That's a serious responsibility. You should definitely pay $100,000 in alimony in the divorce trial."
"So, but I haven't cheated, right? Isn't this claim too high?"
"Huh? I'm even making concessions here. You've been working right after high school, so you really don't know the world. That's why you have such a perception. It's your detachment from reality that always gives me chills and goosebumps."
James's malicious words shattered my rationality. The tiny bit of affection I had for James in my heart transformed into a fiery rage. "So, I don't need to show any mercy to this man. If I'm going to act, I'll do it thoroughly." With that thought in mind, I decided on my course of action. I resolved to socially isolate both my husband James and his affair partner Jennifer, along with the people who raised them. First, I informed James that his demands wouldn't be met. "Your demands won't be accepted, you know. First of all, the house is what I inherited from Dad when I was young, so it's not marital property. And the car is in the name of my company, so that's also not marital property. Do you understand? And just because you can't get shared property from me doesn't mean you can take all the savings. In fact, I should be the one receiving money since I've been paying for all our living expenses."
"What? So there's no rental income from the leased shop?" "No, but I've lived in this house for 3 years, so I should have residency rights."
What are you talking about? Residency rights are something that comes up in evictions, not divorces. Are you thinking in terms of corporate housing since you were in the General Affairs Department?"
"Ah, damn it!"
My husband seemed like he wanted to say something, but he couldn't keep up and remained silent, biting his lip. And about me being out of touch with reality? Well, then what's this?
I held up the photos collected by the detective agency over the past year, showing James and Jennifer's affair right in front of James.
Wait, why do you have these?
James's face, which had been flushed with anger, turned pale. I already know about your affair with this Jennifer woman since before our marriage. Even someone as delusional as you can understand this, right? Take some time to think about your next move. With that, I sent James to the bedroom. Then I called my lawyer again, whom I had contacted in advance.
Hello, Mrs. Mary. I was waiting for your call. Today, being a holiday, Mr. James's family was having breakfast together.
Is that so? That's good to hear. So they will all come?
Yes, they all agreed to come after I talked to them. However, it will take about 2 hours for them to arrive.
Understood. Please tell them I appreciate the effort. 2 hours later, the family lawyer and James's in-laws arrived on time, and I welcomed them into the room. The in-laws had already been briefed by the lawyer about James's affair. John, my father-in-law, turned pale as he entered my room and approached me.
Mary, I'm terribly sorry for the awful thing James has done.
John, thank you for coming today. Please take a seat on the sofa, and I'll explain everything in detail. After inviting the in-laws to sit in the living room and giving them a moment, I called James. James, nonchalantly scratching his head, walked into the living room only to be met with glares from all the in-laws.
Ugh, why are Dad and the others here?
Seeing the in-laws seated in the living room, James couldn't help but raise his voice. Finding it tedious to deal with every reaction of James, I simply made him sit on the floor. In those 2 hours, James must have realized that his demands were not going to be met and that it was more beneficial for him not to divorce.
I've decided to call off the divorce,
he said, once again speaking down to me. Always looking down on me, aren't you? I was so beyond exasperated that I handled this foolish man's behavior with calmness. First, let's revisit this evidence. I presented the proof of James's affair one more time, this time in front of the in-laws. Photos of James and his mistress Jennifer hugging at the hotel entrance. Documents detailing the exact dates and times they met. And the audio data from the cafe where they discussed claiming alimony from me in a divorce trial. John, after seeing this evidence, was silent. His face flushed as he followed the dates and times James and Jennifer met. Linda, my mother-in-law, and Elizabeth, my sister-in-law, looked somber, tears welling up as they saw photos of James and Jennifer being affectionate. Linda repeatedly muttered, "I can't believe James would do this." Sighing with each photo she turned, I wondered what my brother-in-law Robert was thinking. He sat with his arms crossed, eyes closed, frowning, looking up at the ceiling. As I observed the in-laws' reaction, I said, "Well, there's absolutely zero chance that James is innocent. The evidence I've presented is conclusive, and James has nothing to refute it." Hearing this, Robert and Linda burst into tears and apologized to me.
Mary, we're so sorry. It's our fault for raising James to be such a scoundrel.
Then, seeing his parents' state, Robert suddenly kicked James, who was sitting on the floor.
You damn James! Don't you realize your actions are worse than animals?
Robert, known for his strong sense of justice and having once aspired to be a professional kickboxer, was furious at his brother James's despicable behavior and couldn't help but lash out. Robert's powerful kick sent James sprawling face first onto the floor.
Bro, what the heck are you doing? That's disgusting.
Elizabeth, who had been bullied by James since they were kids and had always despised him, was clearly fed up. According to her, James always had a tough attitude towards the weak. Elizabeth, having been victimized by James in the past, decided to cut ties with her brother upon learning of his actions towards me. Her eyes were filled with disgust, no longer seeing James's family but as something vile. After the in-laws' reprimand of my husband, the lawyer began discussing the division of property and alimony for the divorce.
Right. After discussing with Mary, we've decided the following for this divorce case involving James. First, the divorce will be finalized. as we already have the divorce papers James submitted earlier. Regarding the alimony, we're demanding $50,000. As for the division of property, there will be none." He also mentioned that James's actions of hiding the affair and trying to claim alimony could be considered attempted fraud, a criminal offense for which a police report could be filed. However, instead of filing a police report, we would settle for $50,000 in alimony. He informed James and his in-laws that if they didn't accept it, it would lead to mediation and a criminal lawsuit. James seemed utterly unaware that his actions constituted a criminal offense. "No way! If this comes out, I'll be a criminal!"
I couldn't comprehend James's selfish remarks. Even the in-laws began to sympathize with me, irritated by such a cheating husband.
"James, how can you say such things in this situation? We are so sorry, Mary,"
John said, and the in-laws once again deeply apologized, fully accepting my conditions for the divorce. After putting an end to James' betrayal, I asked the in-laws to take him home. I wanted to throw salt at the defeated James as he trudged away, but I refrained out of respect for the in-laws. Then I discussed with my lawyer about Jennifer, James's affair partner. Despite being a university student, she had helped destroy another family. Moreover, in the audio data, Jennifer referred to me as a senile mother's annoying old lady and an unfortunate woman with only a high school diploma, ridiculing me with James.
"Hey, James, since we're divorcing anyway, let's get a lot of money from this old lady,"
she had said. Furthermore, the plan to extort alimony from me in the divorce trial was mostly Jennifer's idea, as revealed in the audio data. It's appalling how someone I've never met could plot something so terrible, I thought, my anger boiling over. I decided to take action against Jennifer, James's mistress. A few days later, after my lawyer surveilled Jennifer and informed me she had returned home, I waited nearby. Once her family was gathered, we met and approached Jennifer's house. The lawyer rang the doorbell, and Jennifer's mother hurried to the door, opening it with a fluster.
"Hello, we need to speak with Jennifer and her family,"
my lawyer said, presenting his business card. "Wait, please, wait a moment." Jennifer's mom, confused by the sudden visit, asked us to wait and went back to consult with Jennifer's dad. Minutes later, she reappeared, reluctantly letting us in. Inside, the scenario unfolded much like with James. The lawyer laid out the detective's report on the table. Initially in denial, Jennifer's family eventually had to accept the overwhelming evidence. My lawyer then demanded $30,000 from Jennifer as alimony in the divorce trial. Jennifer's dad retorted,
"That's extortion. I'll sue for blackmail."
To which my lawyer calmly replied, "Then we'll see you in court." And we left Jennifer's house. After that, I left all negotiations with Jennifer to my lawyer. Facing these people again would be nothing but distressing for me. The day after, my lawyer received numerous calls from Jennifer's dad, not to apologize, but to negotiate a reduction in the alimony. My lawyer responded,
"Mary's emotional damage cannot be measured in money. What's needed is your willingness to apologize. The very fact that you're trying to haggle over the alimony shows a lack of sincere remorse. If you continue with these unproductive calls, we ask you to refrain from contacting us."
He sternly informed Jennifer's dad. Jennifer's dad must have realized the gravity of his actions, as he eventually managed to gather the $30,000 by selling his valuables and paid it by the deadline. Later, Jennifer, along with her parents, visited my lawyer to offer a profound apology. Jennifer was in tears, her makeup smeared from crying. Apparently, she was cheated on by her boyfriend, with whom she was having an affair with James.
"I regret what I did to Mary,"
Jennifer sobbed to my lawyer. I hope this ordeal has made Jennifer more sensible and she seriously pursues her job search. Despite the chaos caused by the divorce, I managed to protect the shop my dad built from the ambitions of my ex-husband James and his mistress Jennifer. Now my days are busy with work and visits to mom, but I have more free time than when I was married to James.
This is because I used the alimony from the divorce to hire employees. Flower arrangement is very popular among women now, and job postings of learning and working in this skill attract many applicants. Having enthusiastic employees makes my job more fulfilling. Now I can delegate some work to them and have more time to visit mom. The staff, which started with just one person, has grown to a dozen. We regularly supply to a famous hotel, stabilizing the business. I'm truly happy now. By the way, my lawyer told me that after the divorce scandal, James and Jennifer got married following her pregnancy. However, it's unclear whose child she's carrying, as she was going back and forth between James and her boyfriend at the time. James was demoted at his construction company for disrupting the workplace order by having an affair with a part-time employee despite being married. His company, known for its high compliance standards, is unforgiving of such misconduct. One wonders how James will manage with a child on the way, but that's no longer my concern. As for my love life, I met a fashion designer at a flower design event for a fashion show, and we started dating. He knows about my past and says there's no need to rush into marriage. We both value creativity in our professions and want to cherish that first. Indeed, in today's world, marriage isn't the only way to maintain a partnership. I'm not sure if it fits my dad's advice to challenge yourself with something new every day, but I value my relationship with him the most and want to continue walking together in life.
I'm Susie, a 35-year-old office worker. My family consists of my mom and my younger sister Mary. Dad passed away from an illness 3 years ago. Since graduating from college, I've been focused solely on my career, and before I knew it, I reached this age. During this time, many of my colleagues got married, and to be honest, I felt a bit anxious. I even went to parties when invited, but never met the right person. I thought, who would want to be with someone as uninteresting as me? In fact, at one of these parties, a man said something along those lines to me, so I decided there was no need to force myself to find a partner. But Mom didn't understand this mindset. "Susie, when are you going to get married? You're well past 30 now. Don't just focus on work. Think about your own happiness, too." "I know, Mom, but I'm busy with work, and I don't have time for this. Please, don't call me about this anymore." Mom worried about me not getting married even after turning 30. Started calling more often. I appreciated her calls, but felt sorry that I had nothing to report. Several times, Mom sent me photos of single men she knew, but I wasn't keen on marrying just for the sake of it, and was considering staying single. That's when I met Walter, who would later become my fiancé, at a cafe I happened to visit. "You come to this cafe quite often, don't you? Do you like places like this?" "Huh?" Startled, I shrank back when an unfamiliar man approached me. "Yes, well, I've been a bit tired from work lately. I come here for some comfort." Then Walter responded with a smile. "Really? I started coming here too, looking for some relief from work fatigue." I was delighted that he responded with a smile to my uninteresting story. Turns out, Walter works for a major company and is considered a promising future leader. He said it's nice to be appreciated, but the pressure had been tiring him out lately, which is why he started coming to this calm and soothing cafe. That encounter led to us dating, and since he worked for a major company, he always took me to fancy restaurants, and he paid for everything every time. "You don't always have to take me to fancy places. A casual spot would be just fine." Worried about his financial situation, I couldn't help but say that. "Don't worry, I work for a big company and my salary is good, so don't think about it." Though he confidently said this every time, having never dated someone like him, I was initially bewildered. However, after half a year, Walter began to change. He started forgetting his wallet more often. "Oh, sorry. I left my wallet in my desk at work again. Can you cover for me this time?" Sure, that's okay." I ended up paying again,
which made me wonder if he was doing it on purpose. But every time, Walter looked genuinely sorry, and a month later, he paid back everything I had covered. So I decided he must have just been forgetful. After 2 years of dating, we decided to get married. There was so much to do, like choosing the venue and the guest list. I had already told my family about the wedding, and Mom cried tears of joy. When I mentioned the family meeting, my sister Mary said she wouldn't attend. Her reason was that she wasn't interested in my fiancé.
He's your fiancé, right? I bet he's just another dull, unremarkable guy. I don't want to waste my precious time on someone like that.
That's what she said. Mom was more upset about this comment than I was. What are you saying? Your sister is getting married. It's only natural for family to attend a family meeting. Eventually, Mom persuaded her, and Mary reluctantly agreed to attend. At that time, I had no idea that this family meeting would drastically change the course of our lives. The meeting was set to take place in a suite of a fancy hotel recommended by my boss. Having never been in such a luxurious hotel, I was nervous just being there. While being shown to the room by the staff, his parents hadn't arrived yet. Mom was excitedly waiting, but as usual, Mary looked bored, fiddling with her phone and even yawning loudly. As we were waiting and sipping on drinks, he and his parents walked in.
Sorry we're late. We got caught in traffic, which delayed our arrival.
The moment he entered the room, Mary, who had been idly playing with her phone, completely changed her demeanor.
No way! Is that really my sister's fiancé? He's so handsome.
Why didn't you tell me sooner? Her eyes sparkled as she looked at Walter.
Nice to meet you. I'm Mary, her sister. Thank you for always taking care of my sister.
She approached Walter and greeted him in a sweet tone.
Mary, don't be rude. Go, sit down.
Mom reprimanded her, and I thought Mary would take her seat. But then I witnessed an unbelievable scene.
Wait, why are you sitting next to Walter? That's where Walter's dad and Mom are supposed to sit. You should sit over here.
Mary had sat next to Walter, pushing aside his parents. His parents were shocked, their eyes wide open.
What are you doing? It's a family meeting, and you're being so disrespectful. If you don't stop, I'll have you leave this room.
Reluctantly, Mary moved back to her original seat. I apologized to his parents. The family meeting began amidst a heavy atmosphere. Still, Mary's interest was solely on Walter. She asked him inappropriate questions like his salary since he worked at a major company and kept commenting on how handsome he was. Despite the delicious food in front of us, I couldn't taste any of it because of Mary. Every time Mary asked something inappropriate, I apologized to his parents repeatedly. Such exchanges happened repeatedly. Honestly, I feared the engagement might be called off. But as we were leaving, his parents said they looked forward to our future together, which relieved me.
Mary, what were you thinking? Because of you, we were terribly embarrassed at the family meeting. You're definitely not invited to the wedding. Yeah, I'm so embarrassed too. I regret inviting someone who brought such shame.
In the car ride home, Mom and I firstly criticized Mary's behavior, but Mary herself seemed unbothered.
Well, but if you marry Walter, he'll be my brother-in-law, right? We'll have a long relationship, so we should get along. Shouldn't we? I don't think what I did today was wrong.
I was astonished by Mary's lack of apology or remorse and how she justified her actions. As soon as I got home, I called Walter to apologize for my sister's behavior. Walter laughed it off, but I was utterly embarrassed. After that, we started discussing the wedding as usual, and at the time, I had no idea that I had already fallen into my sister's trap. That day, we had a wedding planning meeting, and I was supposed to meet Walter after work, but he didn't show up at the agreed time. But he wasn't answering his phone. This is strange. Did something happen? Finally, he answered the phone about 30 minutes after our scheduled time.
Sorry, a sudden meeting came up and I can't make it. Can you go ahead with the discussion without me?
Again? You couldn't make it last time because of work. Can't you do something about the meeting?
I can't leave an important meeting, sorry, but that's how it is.
With that, Walter hung up. Normally, he would never do this and would inform me in advance if he couldn't make it. But recently, he's been canceling after the agreed time more frequently. Unbeknownst to me, Mary had been in contact with Walter. At the family meeting, Mary took a liking to Walter. I was aware they had exchanged contact information then, despite Mom's warnings.
What are you talking about? If someone in the family falls ill, who will contact Walter? We're going to be family, so it's okay to exchange phone numbers, right?
She justified it by saying this and exchanged numbers right in front of me. Indeed, we don't have Dad, and most families do exchange phone numbers. So I thought it was okay to exchange numbers for that reason, but I should have been more suspicious of Mary. Apparently, she had been waiting outside Walter's company. However, she couldn't meet the Walter she was looking for.
Walter, it's Mary. I just happened to be in front of your company. Would you like to have dinner together?
You're here now? That's troubling. I'm not at the company. I'm out on business. Maybe we can meet at a cafe nearby later?
Thus, the two started having secret meetings without me. Initially, Walter was bewildered, but he was charmed by her bubbly personality and cute appearance. Soon, they started calling each other by familiar names. Even when Walter visited my family home, it didn't change.
Hey, I really don't like you calling my fiancé like that. Can you tone it down a bit?
I asked Mary to refrain, feeling quite upset.
What's the problem? She's a fun and friendly person. There's no need to get mad over something like that, right?
No matter how disrespectful Mary was, Walter didn't seem to mind. In fact, their closeness was becoming concerning. But that wasn't all. During one of our meetings, Walter suddenly asked me,
Hey, I want to ask you something.
What do you want to know?
What kind of job does Mary have? And what about her annual income and savings?
Why are you asking about Mary's income and savings?
I don't even know that. I was taken aback by his sudden interest in Mary's job, income, and savings. Obviously, I didn't have an answer. And my distrust of Walter grew. With mixed feelings, the wedding day approached. And then, on what was supposed to be a joyous day, my wedding day, I experienced an unimaginable betrayal. It happened on the eve of the wedding. As I was about to sleep, preparing for the next day, Mary called me. Her words left me in disbelief.
I have something to tell you. I'm getting married to Walter tomorrow.
What? That doesn't make any sense. Explain yourself.
I raised my voice in response to her absurd statement.
That's right. Walter and I are getting married. He realized I'm cuter and I'm a better woman than you, so he decided to switch to me.
It turned out they had been developing a relationship behind my back. Their close distance and familiar manner with each other now made sense. They were secretive when using their phones around me, hiding screens and getting angry when I asked, claiming they were just business messages. I had found it strange that he would smile mischievously while supposedly handling work messages. Now, it all made sense. The discomfort I had felt finally aligned. But what Mary was doing was inexcusable. It was stealing. Unaware or uncaring of my shock, Mary continued.
By the way, you were planning your wedding at the fancy hotel tomorrow, right? It would be a waste to cancel the reservation and pay the cancellation fee, so I'll use it instead of you.
Excuse me?
Not content with just stealing my fiancé, she planned to have her wedding at the hotel we had reserved. It was a famous hotel where many celebrities had their weddings, a hotel I had secretly longed for. The thought of marrying Walter there had filled me with happiness and excitement. To have not only my fiancé, but also my dream taken away by my sister plunged me into utter despair. I called Walter for confirmation, and to my dismay, he was currently with Mary.
I prefer someone bright and charming like Mary over a quiet person like you.
Walter, laughing,
said he preferred someone bright and charming like Mary over a quiet person like me. It was then I realized Walter's true nature. I never thought the man I believed was kind could be so rotten at the core. So I cut ties with both Mary and Walter. Crying, I told Mom about the broken engagement. Mom was furious and tried to call Mary, but she had already turned off her phone. Mom, I'm sorry. I thought I could finally make you happy. I never expected this to happen. Unable to contain my emotions in front of Mom, I broke down in tears. Mom simply held me in her arms without a word, which only made me cry harder. Of course, I had to explain to relatives that the wedding was off and why. Everyone condemned Mary's actions.
My niece stealing someone else's fiancé? What kind of nerve does she have? I need to give her a piece of my mind,
said my aunt, who had always doted on me. But their disapproval didn't change the fact that my sister had stolen my fiancé. I felt so ashamed as I explained the situation to friends and colleagues, often breaking down in tears. I couldn't help but imagine Mary and Walter happily preparing for their wedding at the hotel I had longed for. Mary, being who she is, must have bragged to all her friends about her wedding the next day. The thought made me feel unbearable regret. On the actual day of the wedding, I imagined them surrounded by friends, celebrating happily. But then on the day of the wedding, an unexpected punishment befell my sister.
What's going on, big sister?
Mary called during the time the ceremony was supposed to be happening.
Why are you calling me? Don't ever contact me again,
I said, about to hang up. But then Mary revealed something shocking.
When I got to the venue, not a single guest was there, and I can't reach Walter at all. What's happening?
No guests had shown up at the venue.
Isn't that your fault? You probably bragged to your friends and told them to definitely come, right? Yes, I did brag to them all yesterday, saying they must come, but not a single person showed up.
Bragging like that? Maybe that's why no one came.
And who invites guests the day before the wedding? Normally you send invitations and get confirmations. And more importantly, Walter. I thought he worked for a major company, but it turns out he's a fraudster.
Excuse me? I was shocked when I heard this. Walter had always claimed to be an employee of a major company with a promising future. And now, a fraudster? He had taken the money Mary gave for the wedding expenses and disappeared. I learned that he had done the same to several other women. He had been borrowing money from many women under various false pretenses, like needing funds for a new business or his mother's care. Each victim was swindled out of around $20,000, and they filed police reports against him. The truth about him being a fraudster was revealed on the wedding day when several of his victims unexpectedly showed up at the venue. They demanded compensation for their mental anguish and repayment of their lost money. That's when Mary found out Walter was a fraudster. I remember him asking me for money too. He said he might be going overseas for work and needed money for furniture, but I didn't lend him any because I didn't have much savings at the time.
When he approached me, he talked about going independent and moving abroad. He asked for $20,000 for initial expenses.
So the other victims were told similar stories and lent him money. He always used sweet words, promising a life free of financial worries after marriage to gain their trust and borrow money. The money he had been using on me was probably extracted from these women. He must have been sweet-talking women like that, getting them to support him financially. Hearing this, I was relieved that I didn't lend him any money when he asked.
The police came to the wedding venue and he was arrested for fraud. What about my wedding?
Mary complained, upset that her wedding was ruined.
What can I say?
You stole the man I was going to marry, and it turns out he was a fraudster. I'm actually relieved I didn't marry him. Thanks for taking him off my hands. Just yesterday, I was devastated by Mary stealing my fiancé. But today, I feel grateful she did. Mom, who had been listening, was initially shocked but now seemed amused. Mom in a voice that was just audible enough for Mary to hear.
That's what you get for stealing someone's fiancé.
That's what she said.
Wait, what about the payment for the wedding venue? I was deceived, so I shouldn't have to pay, right?
Mary asked. Excuse me? The wedding expenses are your responsibility, regardless of being deceived. I'm no longer involved. I had already informed the planner that Walter and Mary would be having the wedding, so the payment inevitably falls on them. You get a bill from the venue later. Even if you cancel on the day, you'll have to pay the full amount, so take care of it. The cost of the wedding was about $50,000, a significant amount. I knew Mary couldn't pay it, but Mom firmly said she wouldn't help her this time, especially considering the trouble Mary had caused. Since Walter was in custody, he obviously couldn't pay, so the bill would go to Mary.
Wait, I'm not good at saving money. I can't pay $50,000. Can you cover it for me, big sister?
What are you talking about? Neither Mom nor I will help you. Just accept it and pay the $50,000.
It's impossible. I can't do it. Please, help me. I promise I won't do anything like this again.
Despite Mary's repeated pleas and cries over the phone, I felt no sympathy. Mary then went to see Walter in jail to ask him to pay for the wedding. But being incarcerated for fraud, he couldn't pay. So Mary ended up having to pay the full $50,000. Without any money left, she came to our house.
Mom, help me. I've been evicted from my apartment. I have no savings. Let me stay here for a while.
Normally, a parent might want to help their child in such a situation, but Mom's response was different.
Help you?
A woman who steals another's man is no daughter of mine. Sort out your own problems. With that, Mom refused to let her inside the house. Mary, who had thought Mom would be on her side, was left crying and begging at the door. But Mom was unmoved. Eventually, Mary had to find an old, rundown apartment to live in. Mary tried asking relatives and friends for loans, but given her reputation and attitude, they were fed up with her. She became a laughingstock, looked down upon my relatives and friends. Once I received a letter from Walter in prison asking for help. He had no one to turn to and no money. Of course, I had no obligation to help him, so I threw the letter away and, considering my safety, decided to move elsewhere. 3 years later, I married my boss from the same company. I never thought I'd marry again, but he supported me when I was down. I never imagined that my soulmate was so close. He even booked the fancy hotel I originally wanted for our wedding, and we had a grand celebration. Blessed by many friends, relatives, and colleagues, I felt truly happy. Most importantly, I could finally give Mom peace of mind and felt genuinely relieved. I'm determined to keep this happiness and work hard for our future. Director Wilson is just wrong as a person. Defending the cleaning lady, Mrs. Johnson, who had been doused with a bucket of water, I stood up to my arrogant boss and got demoted for it. You dare talk back to me, woman? That's why this is happening to you. Your career is over. Director Wilson sneered. But then, President Taylor came to my house, looking pale, begging. Please come back immediately. I need you. In the president's office, bewildered and trying to grasp the situation, I was met by a surprising individual. My name is Megan. Having graduated high school, I started working this year as a new employee in a mid-sized company. I lost my parents in an accident when I was young and only had my grandparents. Even past their retirement age, they worked hard to let me finish high school. Megan, you're smart. You should go to college. My grandparents urged, but I didn't want to burden them further, so I chose to work instead. To lessen their load, I started living alone when I got the job.
The work, filled with new challenges, was tough, but I was motivated to repay my grandparents for raising me. Luckily, my seniors were incredibly kind, always explaining things clearly. Determined not to let them down, I worked hard too. However, there was one presence that unnerved me. My boss, Director Wilson. Arrogant and belligerent, he'd shout at the slightest displeasure. The senior said he was the president's relative, protected by nepotism, unskilled but untouchable, feared for demoting disliked subordinates. Everyone endured his behavior. Being a high school graduate, a newbie, and a woman, I was an easy target for his stress relief, faced daily with his sarcasm. Others noticed but could only comfort me in his absence. I endured, telling myself this was the working world, not wanting to lose my job and worry my grandparents. If I lost my job, my grandparents would also be worried. Even in such a workplace, someone comforted me. Emily Grace Johnson, the cleaning lady, a gentle, always smiling woman. She'd encourage me whenever I vented about my boss. You're working so hard, aren't you? I always felt inspired to work hard when I thought of Emily, the cleaning lady beloved by everyone, and how she reminded me of my grandmother in the countryside. Emily, though in a different role, was striving just as hard in the same company. I couldn't let a mean boss like Wilson defeat us. I loved Emily for always instilling that fighting spirit in me. But the spiteful Wilson was, of course, harsh on Emily too. One day, while walking inside the office, I came across Emily doing her cleaning. She was mopping the hallway, stepping aside for passing employees. As I was about to greet her, I saw Wilson coming from the opposite direction, instinctively hid. Wilson was looking at his mobile phone while walking, and the other employees were walking around to avoid him. I had a bad feeling. Then it happened. Wilson, engrossed in his phone, kicked a bucket, spilling water from it. Some of the water splashed onto the hem of Wilson's pants and his shoes.
Damn, that's cold!
Emily rushed over to him, worried. Oh no, are you all right? For a moment, I thought, serves you right. But then I remembered that it was Wilson, the mean one. He started making a fuss, even though he was barely wet.
Hey, old lady, your fault! My clothes and shoes got wet!
Wilson spat angrily. Clearly, it was Wilson's fault for walking while looking at his phone. Emily had carefully placed the bucket out of the way in the corner of the hallway. I felt angry that Wilson was so upset, especially since he was the one who made more work for Emily.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry,
Emily said, confused and flustered. Wilson shouted at her.
I have an important business meeting coming up. What am I supposed to do now?
I'm so sorry. You got wet. What should we do? Emily, apologizing repeatedly, knelt on the floor and began wiping Wilson's shoes with a clean towel.
It's not about saying sorry, old woman.
While shouting, Wilson grabbed the bucket, still partly filled with water. Oh, Emily, watch out! My voice failed to come out as a warning, and Wilson, unbelievably, turned the bucket upside down over Emily's head, who was still kneeling. A considerable amount of water must have been inside. Water dripped from Emily's hair, and she looked stunned, not understanding what had happened.
Now you know how it feels to be drenched like me,
Wilson said with a vile smile to Emily. Seeing Emily soaked through, resembling my grandmother, I couldn't hold back any longer. If staying silent meant witnessing this, I'd rather quit. That's how I felt. How can you do such a thing? This is too much! I stepped forward in front of Wilson and Emily and protested as if letting out all the frustration I had been holding back. Emily is not at fault. It was wrong for you, Director Wilson, to walk while looking at your mobile phone.
I pointed out Wilson's obvious mistake. I got splashed with water, so I'm the victim here. Wilson yelled back, but anyone could see who the real victim was in the situation. The commotion drew many employees around. Even so, throwing a bucket of water on someone is unreasonable. That's downright violence.
What? Do you realize who you're talking to?
Wilson retorted. Of course, as a person, you're wrong, director. Though he yelled, Wilson was speechless in the face of my unwavering confrontation, something he wasn't used to. Wilson silently offered a handkerchief to the drenched Emily. Seeing it was far from enough, she glared at the standing Wilson. As the crowd gathered, making it awkward, he shouted,
You better be ready for what's coming after saying that to me,
and quickly walked away. Thank you, Megan. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, usually always smiling, but now looking sad. It pained me to see her like this, wondering if Megan is okay after saying that. Emily was more concerned about me than herself being wet. I'm fine, don't worry. Though I was nervous inside for speaking my mind to Wilson for the first time, I maintained composure and helped clean up the spilled water. After parting with Emily and returning to work, I found Wilson's usual seat empty. He must have gone to the president's office to tattle on me. I might lose my job over this. I worried but also felt I haven't done anything wrong. Expressing my thoughts to Wilson had oddly cleared my mind, helping me focus on work. The next day, fears came true. I was suddenly issued a transfer order to the countryside. Stunned, Wilson approached my desk, gloating.
That's what you get for talking back to me, a woman. Your life's over now.
Watching his triumphant face, frustration welled up in me. Looking around, naturally no one dared to stand up to Wilson. Everyone pretended not to see or hear. So this is how the company is? I had anticipated this to some extent, but the indifference of my colleagues was equally shocking. Feeling dejected, I walked aimlessly through the office corridors. Emily rushed to me, apologizing frantically.
Megan, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to make it up to you. I feel terrible.
Her distress reminded me of my grandparents in the countryside. Not wanting to worry her, I stood tall and confidently said, It's okay, Emily. I'm happy to get away from that manager. It's a relief not to be fired. I've always wanted to tell him off. I smiled bravely, but Emily still looked worried. I wish there was something I could do. Busy days followed. Even with my transfer decided, work continued as usual. Wilson, to harass me, piled on more tasks, slowing down my progress. But being busy kept me from dwelling on my gloom. Emily, since learning about my transfer, lost her usual smile, often lost in thought, visibly downcast. I wanted to see her smile again before I left. How could I bring back her smile? That was my only concern. With just a year at the company, I had a fair amount to hand over. I finished all the transfer procedures the day before my move. As I was packing up, Wilson appeared.
I'm so happy. I won't have to see your face from tomorrow. Poor thing. Spending your youth in some dull countryside. But do your best, though you'll probably just go back home soon.
He taunted till the end. His words constricted my heart. I hadn't yet told my grandparents about my transfer. I won't see Grandma and Grandpa for a while, I thought, bowing out and leaving the company. The next morning, ready to depart from my new assignment, I opened my door to find a black luxury car parked outside. Startled by the car, like something out of a drama, a familiar yet unfamiliar man stepped out. Have I seen him before? Then it hit me. Looking closely, it was the company president. Why is the president here? Shocked, I froze in place. The president, with a pale face, seemed frantic.
Please come back to the office right away. I beg you. He said this, bowing his head. Seeing the rarely seen company president bowing left me bewildered and unable to grasp the situation. Impatient, the president raised his head, urging, "Just come with me." He pushed me into the car. Seated, the car started moving. While I couldn't understand what was happening, I thought, this seat is really comfortable. As I looked out the window, escaping reality, we arrived at the company. Still not understanding the situation, the president led me to his office. Entering the office, I saw a well-dressed man and an elegantly attired older woman sitting on the sofa. As I entered, they stood and approached me. That woman, Emily? To my surprise, the elegantly dressed woman in the president's office was Emily. She looked refined and beautiful, a stark contrast to her usual work clothes. "Megan, sorry to startle you," Emily said with her usual smile. Confused by the gathering of these unfamiliar people, I was dumbstruck again. The president, upon entering, seemed apologetic towards the suited man, while Emily smiled at me. The well-dressed man changed the uneasy atmosphere. "First," he said, offering me his business card. It bore the name of a major corporation, a key business partner influencing my company's fate. The name was Lucas Benjamin Johnson, with the title CEO. "My mom always speaks highly of you." President Johnson greeted me, and I looked at Emily, who nodded with a smile. Then I realized Emily was Johnson's mother. Emily, who always loved cleaning, chose to work in cleaning so as not to rely entirely on her son, who is the president. It happened to be at the company where I work. For her, it was convenient to work while keeping an eye on her son's business partners. Emily knew of Wilson's bad reputation, but felt helpless and had been troubled for a long time. However, after I was transferred for defending her, she consulted her son to help me. Emily never used her position as the president's mother for work issues before, but this time she did, feeling a bit embarrassed as she explained. "When I was splashed with water, I was really sad, but so happy Megan helped me," she said, holding my hands warmly, spreading a gentle feeling in my heart. President Johnson, watching us with a calm gaze, turned to our president with a stern look, saying, "I cannot continue business with a company that transfers young employees for doing the right thing. We'll need to reevaluate our relationship." "I'm terribly sorry. This will never happen again. I will ensure it." Our president, red-faced, desperately apologized. Hearing myself referred to as a young person who did the right thing made me happy. I believed I had done the right thing. Yet after being transferred and receiving no support from anyone, I started doubting if I was fit for the corporate world. But Johnson's words gave me confidence for the first time that I hadn't been wrong. Following these events, I was allowed to return to the company. But what made me happier than returning was hearing Wilson had been transferred to the countryside in my stead. A month has passed, and the one shirking Wilson, who had pushed work onto others, is now considered useless in the new location. Rumors are he might soon be fired. The once arrogant Wilson seems to have lost his spirit. As for Emily, she continues to clean with her usual smile. Everyone talks to her as before, but I know her true identity. Emily asked me to keep it a secret, so it remains between just the two of us. "Good morning." "Oh, good morning, Megan. You're looking cheerful today as well." This daily exchange gives me energy. And while other employees greet each other similarly, the president is the only one who makes a deep, almost 90-degree bow before heading to his office. Knowing why he does this makes me smile a bit, but the other employees, who don't know the reason, initially cared, but now nobody seems to mind. Our once autocratic president has changed his ways, and the workplace has become much more pleasant since Wilson left. Originally, Wilson was the cause of a negative atmosphere, but all the senior staff were kind and helpful
allowing them to work as they wished. A female department head who transferred from another division has been a positive influence. Unlike Wilson, who used to dump work on others, she willingly takes on unfinished tasks and checks if anyone needs help. It's become a friendly and more female-friendly workplace, making everyone more enthusiastic than ever. When I first joined this company, I thought enduring hardships was part of society. Seeing others put up with unfair treatment for the sake of their jobs, I believed I had to do the same. But my experience with Wilson and Emily changed my mind about enduring the unreasonable. That courage I found then has transformed our circumstances so much. Since that incident, I've stopped tolerating nonsense and started speaking my mind clearly. Enduring isn't what society is about. A better society is something we must build ourselves. And now, I finally have juniors to mentor. Teaching others is a great learning experience. Since then, my days have been filled with motivation and have started to shine. Alright, with my next paycheck, I'll take my grandparents on a trip. I can now proudly meet them. I feel thrilled at the thought of showing my grandparents how much I've grown.